Chapter 1725. Even though he didn't mention any names, Luo Yan immediately and keenly sensed that this voice was calling them. He paused and turned back. A trace of vigilance and impatience appeared on his face. What else do you want to do? Don't you think you've harmed Yi enough? Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly and laughed softly as if she had heard a joke. Why do you say that, Senior Luo Yan? When did I harm Nan Yi? From the beginning to the end, weren't you the ones who pursued us relentlessly and wanted to kill us all? They had only carried out a counterattack, so why was the other party so relentless? Could it be that only you are allowed to win and bully others, and that it is a crime for others to resist and defend themselves? Luo Yan was speechless for a moment. He came over halfway and didn't know the cause and effect. After hearing Nan Yi's words, he was certain that everything was the other party's fault. But just now, he finally learned the truth from Elder Wu Peng and the others. Of course, he also knew that Nan Yi herself had to bear a large part of the responsibility for this matter. But he had always doted on Nan Yi and would unconsciously speak up for her in his heart. In addition, Nan Yi's current situation was too miserable. He really couldn't control himself and blamed all his resentment and anger on others. Chu Liuyue's gaze landed on Nan Yi. Nan Yi seemed to have sensed something and looked over as well. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Luiyue asked with a faint smile. Second Miss Nan, are you done crying? Nan Yi suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave and it was bone-chilling. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in her mind, Shangguanyu, it's really scary. Her hysterical wailing stopped abruptly. Facing such a gaze, she couldn't even cry. Shangguanyu nodded in satisfaction. Looks like you've cried enough. This Nan Yi was really strange. His tongue had already been cut off by Rong Xiu for sowing discord and distorting the truth. Who would have thought that she was still unrepentant and even dared to cry in front of so many people? He really doesn't want to take my life. It finally quieted down. Chu Luiyue turned around and took a look. It was empty. All the darkness around her had gradually faded away when she had devoured the energy of heaven and earth to repair the music score. When she finished repairing the music score, the last bit of darkness was illuminated by the brilliant light. As for Senior Ah Jing, he disappeared as well. Chu Luiyue looked around. She was in a special space within the wall. The wall had become transparent, so the people outside could clearly see her figure, and she could also see everything outside. However, judging from their reactions, they probably didn't see Senior Ah Jing, let alone know of his existence. Chu Luiyue felt somewhat regretful. She knew that Senior Ah Jing had helped her a lot. In the end, she didn't even have the time to say thank you before they were separated. What a pity. She was silent for a moment, but quickly collected her emotions and turned to look at Dumpling. She waved her hand. Dumpling. Ah, you. Seeing that Chu Luiyue had finally finished everything smoothly, Dumpling heaved a sigh of relief. Then she rushed towards her excitedly and threw herself into her arms. She hugged Chu Liuyue's neck tightly with both arms and curled up in Chu Liuyue's arms, rubbing her cheeks intimately. Ah, you. Ah, you. Dumpling missed you so much. Chu Liuyue's heart warmed and she hugged her even tighter. I missed you too. For Tuanzi, perhaps only a few days had passed in the meantime. But for her, it had been decades. Senior Ah Jing had said before that she had read faster than expected, so it didn't take her 100 years. However, it was still decades. She didn't feel it before, but now that she was hugging Dumpling's soft little body and listening to her soft and coquettish voice, Chu Luiyue felt a long-lost longing in her heart. She weighed Dumpling in her arms and then took a step forward. The moment Chu Luiyue walked out of the wall, a breeze blew and rolled up the corner of her clothes. There seemed to be a fluctuation behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked back. The black color that had spread to the edge instantly scattered like thick ink. The stone that had become crystal clear not long ago was quickly dyed black. In less than a quarter of an hour, it returned to its original heavy and solemn appearance. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, no one would have believed that everything had happened here before. She stared at the black stone for a long time and silently said in her heart, "Thank you, Senior Ah Jing." Although no one answered, she still felt that Senior Ah Jing should be able to hear her. Everything around her finally returned to normal. Chu Luiyue turned around and walked forward. Nanny's body tensed up instantly. She was here. What was she going to do? She was already in such a sorry state. Was she still unwilling to give up? Countless chaotic thoughts flashed through Nanny's mind, causing her to feel terrified and nervous. Chu Luiyue walked over step by step. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Nanny instinctively grabbed Luo Yan by the side, her face pale. Luo Yan patted her hand gently, then took half a step forward and blocked Nanny with a cold expression. "What else do you want?" Chu Luiyue didn't stop in her tracks, as if she didn't hear his warning at all. Luo Yan's expression turned even colder. "If you dare to do anything to Yi again, I won't be polite." "You." Before he could finish speaking, Chu Luiyue had already walked in front of the two of them and continued walking forward without stopping. They brushed past each other. She didn't even look at Luo Yan and Nanyi. The rest of Luo Yan's words were suddenly stuck in his throat, unable to go up and down. Chu Luiyue walked for a while before putting Tuanzi down. Then, she solemnly and seriously bowed to Yi Zhao and the other man to thank them. "Thank you, clan leader Yi Zhao and elder Yi Yu, for coming to the rescue." Yi Zhao's expression was indifferent. "Since Dumpling asked for help, we naturally had to come. There's no need to thank us. Besides, we didn't do anything this time." Chu Luiyue straightened her body, curved her lips, and smiled. "Seniors, you're too polite. If they weren't here, the Nan family would definitely not let this matter rest so easily." She, on the other hand, had brought Dumpling to a false alarm and made them worry for a long time. She gently patted Dumpling's head and urged her softly. "Dumpling, why aren't you thanking the two of them?" Tuanzi nodded hard and then bowed to the two of them in a formal manner. "Thank you, Grandpa Clan Leader." "Thank you, Grandpa Fifth Elder." Looking at her cute little face, Yi Zhao's fingers twitched. Why did he feel like pinching her? Unfortunately, he was used to being serious and didn't know what to do. He really couldn't bring himself to do this. At this moment, Elder Yi Yu had already bent his legs slightly and opened his arms magnanimously. He chuckled at Tuanzi and said, "Tuanzi, Tuanzi. Dumpling. Come and let Grandpa Fifth Elder take a good look at you. Are you injured?" Compared to Yi Zhao and the other elders, Elder Yi Yu's attitude toward Chu Luiyue and Dumpling was very good from the start. In addition, he had helped them a lot both openly and secretly, so Chu Luiyue and Dumpling were naturally closer to him. Upon hearing Elder Yi Yu's words, Tuanzi didn't think too much about it and immediately ran over. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of Elder Yi Yu. She lifted her little face and turned left and right, revealing a big smile. "Grandpa Fifth Elder, look. I'm fine." Dumpling was also very grateful for their arrival, so she wasn't stingy with her smile and enthusiasm. Elder Yi Yu's heart was about to melt. Ah. So cute. The Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had never seen someone who could transform into a human at such a young age. Under normal circumstances, the juniors they saw were at least in their teens. But Dumpling looked like she was only 3 or 4 years old now. This was a completely different feeling. Even though they knew that Tuanzi had the purest bloodline and had opened the 4th meridian and was definitely one of the best in the younger generation, looking at her cute and petite appearance, they couldn't help but feel pity for her. They couldn't wait to hold her in their palms and give her all the best things in the world. Finally, Elder Yi Yu couldn't help but reach his hand forward, patting her hair bun tentatively and praising her sincerely. "Dumpling is so awesome." Tuanzi chuckled. Then, it rushed forward and hugged Elder Yi Yu's thigh. "Grandpa Fifth Elder is awesome too. She saw it just now." Those arrogant people from the Nan family were so respectful in front of Grandpa Fifth Elder and the rest. Elder E.U. E. Zhao. Digression, in the blink of an eye, it was the last day of 2019. She still remembered that she was thinking about opening a book at this time last year. A year's time flew by just like that. This year, I'm really grateful for everyone's company and support. Without all of you, there wouldn't be today's February. In the new year, the journey continues. I hope I can still be with all of you. Happy New Year. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1727. Rong Xiu's expression turned cold as he quickly grabbed her hand. The two figures disappeared at the same time. The collapsing void was quickly covered by a thick layer of darkness, completely concealing their tracks. You. Everyone present was shocked by this sudden scene, and they all cried out in alarm. However, it happened too quickly. Before they could react, they had already disappeared. Nan Su Hui frowned and was about to tear open the space again to follow them. Sheng Wanjing stretched out his hand and stopped him. It's useless. The void here is shaking. Every space crack will lead to a different direction. Even if we tear open the space at the same place again, we won't be able to reach the same place as them. Sheng Wanjing had been here before and could be considered the person who was most familiar with the world of divine ruins among the people present. If even he said so, then it proved that this method would not work. Then what should we do? Nan Su Hui's face was filled with anxiety. This person had just come out of the strange wall and had not said anything before he fell into the void again. No one knew where he went. The world was so big. How could they find him? Sheng Wanjing also frowned and fell into deep thought. Actually, this is not the first time something like this has happened. 1,000 years ago, I came here with Yu Hongshan. He was the one who fought with me just now. Back then, a conflict broke out between us here. Due to various coincidences, he was sucked into the black wall and could never come out. As for me, I was swallowed by the void. When I came out, I was already in the northern region of the wilderness. You shouldn't be in fatal danger. Besides, Rong Xiu is with her. It's just. I'm afraid it will be a little difficult to find them immediately. His words silenced the crowd. The northern region of the wilderness. That was a very dangerous place. It was thousands of miles away from here. But this was not the most important thing. For them, even if it was the northern region of the wilderness or a place more dangerous than that, it was not impossible for them to go there. The most important thing was that they had to determine the location of Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu first. The divine ruins world was vast and boundless. Who knew where they had been sent to this time? Amidst the suffocating silence, a loud cry suddenly rang out. Ah! Ah, you is missing. Woo woo woo. Ah, you. The person crying was Dumpling. Sheng Wanjing and the others looked at each other. Everything happened so suddenly that only Rong Xiu reacted the fastest and followed him. Dumpling, on the other hand, was nestled in Yi Zhao's arms, so she couldn't catch up with them immediately. As a result, she was left behind. Seeing Dumpling crying, Yi Zhao immediately panicked. He quickly raised his hand to carefully wipe away Dumpling's tears. His palm was thick and rough, even bigger than Dumpling's face. This action was particularly clumsy. Dumpling, don't cry, don't cry. Yi Zhao was also very anxious. When had he ever done such a thing? Usually, the clansmen were all respectful when they saw him. If anyone did anything wrong, Yi Zhao's reprimand was enough to put a lot of pressure on them. In short, no one dared to be presumptuous in front of Yi Zhao. However, Dumpling was different. On one hand, she didn't grow up in Phoenix Mountain, so she had never seen Yi Zhao's dignity and power. On the other hand, she had been with Chu Luyue for a long time, so her personality had become casual and she wasn't afraid of Yi Zhao's anger at all. If she was afraid, she wouldn't have confronted them head-on in the Phoenix Temple. As a result, Tuanzi burst into tears. Yi Zhao had a headache. Now, not only did he have to carry her, but he also had to coax her. Dumpling's crying made him feel extremely uncomfortable, but he didn't know how to comfort her. Hence, he glared at Elder EU angrily. What are you looking at? Come over and think of a way to coax her. Elder EU, who was inexplicably angered, was stunned. You were the one who hugged her when you were hugging her. Now that you're coaxing her, you're thinking of me? However, he couldn't afford to offend either of them. Furthermore, he also felt terrible when he saw Dumpling crying. Elder EU had no choice but to swallow his words. He pondered for a moment and coaxed, Dumpling, don't cry first. Let's see if we can sense where they are now. If we can find any clues, we can go and look for them directly. After all, there's a contract between them. Hearing this, Dumpling stopped crying. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and nodded while sobbing. Then I'll try. Everyone, including Sheng Wanjing, looked over. Obviously, all their hopes were placed on Dumpling. Dumpling closed her red eyes, held her breath, and began to seriously search for traces of Chu Luiyue. Fortunately, they were no longer within the black wall, so the connection between her and Chu Luiyue was not broken. It was just that this connection was really a little illusory and difficult to grasp. After a while, Dumpling opened her eyes and frowned. Seeing her expression, everyone already had an answer in their hearts. However, Elder EU still asked a question. Dumpling, how is it? Did you find anything? Dumpling shook her head. You seems to still be in the void turbulence. I can't accurately determine her direction and location for the time being. Everyone looked at each other. That's true. If she was really sent from here to somewhere thousands of miles away, it would probably take a long time. Dumpling clenched her small fists. I'll continue to search. I'll definitely find Yu. As long as Chu Luiyue arrived somewhere, she would be able to find him very quickly. In the face of Tuanzi's decision, no one had any objection. Yi Zhao put Dumpling down so that she could focus on searching for Chu Luiyue's aura. Dumpling sat cross-legged and closed her eyes again. The others present also subconsciously held their breaths and quietened down, patiently waiting for Dumpling's answer. On the other side, Chu Luiyue felt that there was nothing under her feet and her body fell back uncontrollably. Immediately, she felt a broad and warm hand grab her wrist tightly. The surroundings instantly fell into darkness. And she was also pulled back by this hand and fell into a familiar embrace. A faint cold fragrance instantly filled her nose, making Chu Luiyue relax a lot. Rongxiu. Rongxiu responded in a low voice. His voice was exceptionally low as he wrapped one arm around her slender waist and hugged her tightly. Chu Luiyue was surprised for a moment. Rongxiu's movements seemed to be much faster than before, and the aura on his body, she didn't have the time to take a closer look at him just now. Now that she was closer, she realized that he seemed to have changed a little. She raised her head slightly and asked with some uncertainty. You. How did you catch up? You broke through? Rongxiu lowered his head, gently grabbed her waist, and pushed her up. Then, he easily found her soft and sweet lips in the darkness. The vague syllables with a smile disappeared between his lips. Chasing you is what I'm best at and most passionate about. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1728. Rongxiu had originally wanted to stop after tasting her, but her lips were too soft, and her breath was too sweet. He almost couldn't help but linger on. After going back and forth a few times, he heard her slightly hurried panting. Only then did he restrain himself and stop. He tilted his head slightly and rested his chin on her shoulder. His hot breath fell on her slender and delicate neck, causing a slight shudder. The hand that was holding her slender waist seemed to have tightened a lot more than before. His body was tense, and he half leaned on her like this. After a while, he let out a long sigh and couldn't help but chuckle. You really reap what you sow, the self-control that he was so proud of always crumbled in front of her. Chu Liuyue's cheeks were slightly hot. Your Highness Holy Son, your heart is really big. Even at this time, you're still thinking about this? Rong Xiu turned his head, and his lips lightly brushed against her cheek. His warm breath fell on her ear, and Chu Luyue could even hear the subtle flow of the surrounding air. Rong Xiu's voice was extremely low and seductive. He said frankly and ambiguously, "It's been so long since you went to Phoenix God Mountain. If I said I didn't want to, I would be lying." His voice was a little hoarse, and mixed with a scorching breath. It was especially easy to make people blush and their hearts beat faster. However, his tone was so frank and upright, and also carried a little obvious grievance. On the contrary, Chu Luyue didn't know how to respond. She stretched out her finger and tapped on his broad and firm chest, changing the topic. "This place is dangerous, your highness should be more careful." Rong Xiu laughed, then straightened up, held her hand, and looked around. It was dark all around them, but there was a light golden barrier around the two of them. Rong Xiu had conveniently set it up when the two of them fell here. The violent turbulence around them was isolated, and the two of them could be said to be calm within the boundary. But the most unsettling thing was that they didn't know where they were going. Chu Luyue said, "Taizu said before that he was sent directly to the northern territory of the untainted land 1,000 years ago. I wonder, where will we be sent to this time?" Rong Xiu smiled. The faint light shone on his face, only revealing his calm and noble demeanor. "It's still somewhere in the divine ruins world." His tone was relaxed and carried a hint of indifference. He didn't seem to take this matter to heart. Hearing his tone, Chu Luyue could not help but turn to look at him. "That's right. There's something I forgot to ask you." Rong Xiu nodded. "Ask away." Chu Luyue pursed his lips slightly. The Nan family's position in the divine ruins world should be higher than the Yuntian Tower, right? But when Nan Yifan saw you, why was he so? She paused for a moment and thought for a long time. She didn't know what words to use to describe it. "You want to ask why Nan Yifan is so afraid of me?" Rong Xiu answered her with a smile. Chu Luyue nodded. Afraid, this word sounded too straightforward, but it was indeed accurate. Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rong Xiu was indeed too strange. After Nan Yi and the others found out about Rong Xiu's identity, they didn't take it to heart. From the beginning to the end, they were all high and mighty, obviously relying on the Nan family's confidence. However, as the head of the Nan family, Nan Yifan's expression immediately changed when he saw Rong Xiu. After that, not only did he swallow his anger and apologize, he even endured Rong Xiu cutting Nan Yi's tongue in public. If he wasn't afraid of Rong Xiu, it would be strange. But, why? Rong Xiu was the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, and now had great power and a noble status. But in the divine ruins world, Yuntian Tower wasn't the only one. Chu Luyue hadn't heard of this Nan family before, but it was obviously more powerful than Yuntian Tower. Then, there must be other more powerful sects that she didn't know about. To be able to make Nan Yifan act like this, Rong Xiu definitely had other trump cards in his hands. Actually, the reason is very simple. I've dealt with him before, and he suffered a loss because of me. Moreover, I have something on him, so, when he sees me, he naturally has to take the initiative to avoid me. Rong Xiu's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. Chu Luyue was secretly shocked. Who was Nan Yifan? His intelligence, methods, and strength were all top-notch. He actually suffered a loss at the hands of Rong Xiu, and even had something on him in the hands of Rong Xiu. Then, it could only mean that Rong Xiu was too heaven-defying. Chu Luyue had always thought that she was good at tricking people, but at this moment, compared to Rong Xiu, it was still unknown who was stronger and who was weaker. Seeing that Rong Xiu was too lazy to talk about the past, Chu Luyue didn't ask in detail. She could tell that Rong Xiu really didn't take this matter to heart. In other words, he didn't put Nan Yifan in his eyes at all. Chu Luyue had a very subtle feeling in her heart. She had long known that Rongxiu was powerful, and could even be said to be unfathomable. She had already realized this when they first met. But now, she felt that she had still underestimated him. Suddenly, the barrier beside the two of them shook violently. Chu Liuyue's thoughts were interrupted. Rongxiu raised his gaze slightly and looked forward. It's time to go out. Chu Liyue followed his gaze and saw that the stagnant darkness suddenly fluctuated. Then, a bright white light shone out from it. The surrounding turbulence became even more violent. Rongxiu's barrier also began to shake more. Chu Liyue only felt that the surrounding power began to crazily squeeze towards her. Rongxiu pulled her into his arms. The next moment, the sky brightened up. The two of them flew out in an instant. Bang! As soon as Rongxiu landed with her in his arms, he heard the sound of something shattering. The dazzling sunlight made it difficult for Chu Liyue to adapt to. She subconsciously narrowed her eyes, then looked down in the direction of the sound. Beneath her feet, a jade plate had been shattered into pieces. It seemed that when they came out just now, Rongxiu stepped on it and it became like this. Fortunately, Rongxiu's boots were of excellent quality, so it was not damaged. Chu Liyue breathed a sigh of relief. However, before she could finish her breath, she acutely sensed that the surrounding atmosphere was not right. It was too quiet. The air seemed to have solidified, but there was also a strong murderous intent, silently covering the sky and earth. Chu Liyue raised her head stiffly and looked around. When she saw the scene around her clearly, she suddenly gasped in shock, and her pupils shrank. This was, almost at the same time, Dumpling, who was far away in the Godslayer mound, suddenly felt something and opened her eyes. Her eyes were bright, and she excitedly raised her hand and pointed in a certain direction. "Ah, you is over there." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1729. The people who had been waiting for a long time also became excited. Shen Guanjing immediately asked, "Dumpling, are you sure?" Dumpling nodded seriously. "Yes. It's over there. She and you have a contract and they are very close to each other. There will be no mistake. It's just that. You seems to be very far from here." Dumpling frowned, feeling a little regretful and worried. Nan Su Huai asked, "So, she and Rongxiu are no longer in the god-slaying tomb?" Dumpling bit her finger and gave an affirmative answer. "Yes." Shen Guanjing calmed himself down. "It's normal. Although the world of divine ruins is vast, it's possible for the void to collapse and the turbulence to send them anywhere. Fortunately, we have Dumpling now. As long as we follow Dumpling's senses, we should be able to find you, and the others soon." Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning also nodded. A huge rock in their hearts was finally lifted. Nan Su Huai said, "There's no time to lose. Let's go over immediately." Of course, Tuanzi agreed wholeheartedly. She wanted to see you so much now. However, Yizhao and Elder Yu were in a dilemma. Dumpling wanted to follow Nan Su Huai and the others to find Chu Liyue. Of course, this was not a problem. But the key was, should they still follow? Originally, they had rushed over to help Dumpling. Now that Dumpling was not in danger, it was time for them to go back. However, Yizhao and Elder Yu were somewhat reluctant. Especially Yizhao. It was not easy for him to get this opportunity to hug Dumpling. However, before he could properly enjoy it, he had to leave. After this separation, he did not know when they would see each other again. Elder Yu glanced at Yizhao a few times. He had followed Yizhao for more than 100 years and was best at figuring out Yizhao's thoughts. In particular, he knew clearly what Yizhao was thinking now. Because he had the same idea. While they were still in a dilemma, Nan Su Huai asked. "Clan leader Yizhao, Elder Yu, what do the two of you plan to do in the future?" He was asking them if they were going to stay or leave. Elder Yu felt somewhat regretful. According to the clan leader's usual style, he would never continue to act with them. Even if it was for Dumpling's sake, he had gradually eliminated his grudge against these people. However, as the patriarch of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, his every word and action would attract the attention of countless eyes in the Divine Ruins world. If they left with these people today, who knew what the outside world would say about them in the future? Elder Yu shook his head. I'm afraid we will escort Dumpling to her destination until she meets up with Shengguanyu. Yi Zhao suddenly spoke. His voice was low, and his expression was solemn. However, the words that came out of his mouth instantly caused Elder Yu to widen his eyes in shock. He looked at Yi Zhao in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. What did the clan leader say? He wanted to escort Dumpling all the way? Didn't that mean he was going to continue to act with Shengguanjing and the others? Nan Su Huai and the others were also very surprised. According to their understanding of Yi Zhao, the latter didn't seem like someone who would be willing to act with them at all. Moreover, his identity was special. If this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a big storm in the entire Divine Ruins world. Needless to say, this was definitely for Dumpling's sake. Nan Su Huai and the others looked at each other, and then at Dumpling in unison. After all, she was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Her treatment was indeed different. Moreover, they could also see that Yi Zhao really doted on Dumpling. He was even willing to make these compromises for her. Nan Su Huai nodded. Clan leader Yi Zhao, please. Yi Zhao looked at Dumpling. Dumpling pointed ahead excitedly. Over there. Dead silence. Chu Liuyue's eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing on a huge square, and it was right in the middle. On the left and right, there were a few rows of people sitting neatly. At a glance, all of them were unfamiliar faces. Most importantly, the aura on these people was extremely powerful. Just by standing there, Chu Luyue felt that it was a little difficult to bear the pressure. The countless pairs of eyes that were filled with scrutiny, suspicion, and hostility made her even more uneasy. These people were not humans. Chu Luyue took a deep breath. She was certain that these people were definitely not humans. The aura on their bodies was somewhat familiar. Chu Luyue slowly clenched her fists. An answer was on the verge of coming out. The Great Phoenix Dragon. It's you guys. Suddenly, a familiar voice was heard. Cold, gloomy, and with a trace of undisguised unwillingness and resentment. Chu Luyue frowned slightly and turned her head to look. In the crowd, a gloomy face came into view. It was Mao Yao. He sat in a relatively remote corner of the second row, very inconspicuous. In addition, during this period of time, he had become haggard and thinner, and he no longer had the high-spirited and proud appearance from before. That was why Chu Luyue did not recognize him at first. But at this moment, when she heard this voice and met that gaze, Chu Luyue immediately confirmed his identity. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Chu Luyue's mind. Mao Yao was here, and the surrounding people seemed to be great phoenix dragons. Then this place was Divine Dragon Island. Rong Xiu's low and calm voice rang in her ears. He laughed, as if he found it quite interesting. I didn't expect that this time we would actually come here. Chu Luyue heard that he was actually in the mood to laugh, and the corners of her eyes twitched violently. Divine Dragon Island. Wasn't that the lair of the great phoenix dragons? They had really barged into a tiger's den. The great phoenix dragon clan was also an ancient divine beast, and they were also extremely arrogant. Although their attitude towards humans was slightly more polite than the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, they had never allowed humans to enter their territory. In all these years, there had never been any news of someone barging into Divine Dragon Island in the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luyue once again carefully examined her surroundings. This solemn and dignified atmosphere, this group of people gathered together, everything was showing that not only had the two of them come to Divine Dragon Island, but it seemed that they had come at a particularly bad time. Senior Mao Yao, how have you been? Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly as she greeted him with ease. It was as if the various battles in the past had never existed. When Mao Yao saw the two of them, he was already furious. At this moment, when he saw the smile on Rong Xiu's face, he was even more furious. Good. The guts of these two people were really big. It was fine if they treated him like that before, but now, they actually dared to barge into Divine Dragon Island. Everyone stared at Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu curiously. Someone asked Elder Mao Yao, "Do you know these two people?" Mao Yao was so angry that he laughed and sneered, "I know them. Of course I know them. These two people are the famous Holy Son of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu. And the one beside him is Shengguan Yu." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1730. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Everyone's expressions changed at the same time. Most of them had heard of Rong Xiu's name before. More importantly, the woman beside him was actually Shengguan Yu. Recently, her name was much more famous than Rong Xiu on Divine Dragon Island. Shengguan Yu? Isn't that the person from Lingshao College? That's her. I heard that Shengguan Jing is her taizu. After Shengguan Jing took away our clansman's corpse, it fell into her hands. She was also the one who injured Elder Mao Yao. This seems like her strength is only at the exalted god level. Elder Mao Yao is so powerful. How could he have suffered such a big loss at her hands? Shoo! Lower your voice. Can't you see that Elder Mao Yao's expression is already very ugly? But I'm also telling the truth. I'm just curious. What's so powerful about this Shengguan Yu? What's so powerful? Heh, she came directly to Divine Dragon Island today. How can an ordinary person have such courage? That's true. But now that she's here, I'm afraid Elder Mao Yao won't let her off so easily, right? Everyone discussed animatedly. Even though they had lowered their voices, everyone present was an expert with extraordinary 5 senses. How could they not hear it? Mao Yao clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged. These people's words were too unpleasant to hear. If it were in the past, even if they thought so, they would definitely not dare to say it directly in front of him. But it was different now. In this Thousand Summit, he was directly removed from the affairs in charge, and the power in his hands was quickly divided up by the other elders. In addition, after he was injured last time, he had not been able to fully recover. Now, his status in the clan was much worse than before. The attitude of these clansmen towards him naturally became disrespectful. Mao Yao could not take it anymore. In the end, he pushed all the blame to the woman not far away. If it were not for her, he would not have been reduced to such a state today. Shengguan Yu should pay back all the torture he had suffered 10 times, 100 times. Seeing the undisguised hatred and resentment in Mao Yao's eyes, Chu Liyue's originally nervous mood inexplicably relaxed a lot. Anyway, what was the use of being nervous now since she had already thoroughly offended the great Phoenix Dragon tribe? She might as well face it calmly and see what they could do. Thinking of this, the pressure in Chu Liyue's heart lessened. Her red lips slightly, Elder Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, long time no see. I didn't expect you to still remember me. Mao Yao was so angry that he almost choked. What the hell was that? In Shengguan Yu's **T, in the end? Elder Mao Senior's words. He sneered and clenched his teeth. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, carrying deep resentment and hatred. Not only do I remember you, but I also remember everything that you've done to me. In other words, he had not forgotten any of the scores between them. Chu Liyue's smile deepened, as if she did not understand the deeper meaning in his words. Thank you for your concern. You. Mao Yao's face was ashen. He finally could not hold back and suddenly stood up. Shengguan Yu. How dare you? Before Chu Liyue could say anything, she heard a calm and dignified voice from beside her. Mao Yao. Mao Yao's expression changed when he heard this voice. Finally, he gritted his teeth and sat down again. However, his eyes were still fixed on Chu Luiyue. If eyes could turn into knives, Chu Luiyue would have been cut into pieces. Chu Luiyue turned her head in surprise. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. His appearance was very ordinary. At a glance, there was nothing special about him. However, he was sitting at the head of the table. His identity was obviously not ordinary. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled slightly. This man, just as she was hesitating, Rong Xiu had already taken a step forward, cupped his fists, and bowed politely. Clan leader Mao Yang, I've long heard of your name. Meeting you today, you really live up to your reputation. It was indeed him. Chu Luiyue knew this name. Ever since Dumpling had broken through to become a Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, she had been paying close attention to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and read a lot of information about them. In the process, she also learned a lot about the Great Phoenix Dragon. Among them was the current clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon, Mao Yang. Speaking of which, Mao Yang was also an extremely legendary figure. It was rumored that his talent was not high. He was just an ordinary existence in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Then, one day, for some unknown reason, his bloodline power suddenly soared, and he became the top genius of the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Since then, his talent and diligence made him more and more outstanding. In the end, he successfully became the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. There was only a difference of a few decades between him and Yi Zhao. To them, this time gap was very small. Therefore, almost everyone, including themselves, regarded each other as their opponents. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts was subtle, so it was inevitable that the two clan leaders would be compared. Unfortunately, Mao Yang and Yi Zhao had never really fought, and the number of times they had met could be counted on one hand. It was difficult for everyone to guess who was the stronger one. After seeing Yi Zhao, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but secretly compare the two of them in her heart when she saw Mao Yang. They were indeed very different. Yi Zhao was serious and cold, revealing the pride in his bones. As for Mao Yang, his expression was gentle, and he looked much easier to get along with than Yi Zhao. Hearing Rong Xiu's words, he also smiled and said, "Everyone says that the holy son of the Yuntian Tower, Rong Xiu, is extraordinarily talented and charming. Today, I see that you are indeed extraordinary." His words were very polite and his attitude was very calm. However, Chu Luiyue secretly frowned in her heart. Although she couldn't tell exactly what it was, she just felt that there was something wrong with this Mao Yang. After all, he was the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. His status was noble and high, so why did he have to be so polite to them? Moreover, this kind of politeness was different from the respect and fear that Nan Yifan had when facing Rong Xiu. It seemed that this was indeed the first time Mao Yang and Rong Xiu had met. In that case, his attitude was even more bizarre. "This is Sheng Wanyu?" Mao Yang's gaze fell on Chu Luiyue. His gaze was sharp and tangible, as if he could see through everything. However, he didn't make anyone feel uncomfortable or offended. Chu Luiyue became more and more vigilant. This Mao Yang is not simple. He is definitely not as gentle as he looks on the surface. However, these thoughts only flashed through her mind quickly, and she didn't show it on her face. Junior Shengguan greets clan leader Mao Yang. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1731. Chu Luiyue bowed politely. Mao Yang's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he quickly looked away. "May I know, why did you suddenly visit today?" Mao Yang asked tactfully. Everyone present clearly saw that the void above the square had suddenly swayed and collapsed. Then, the two of them had suddenly appeared. One must know that they set up layers of barriers around the Divine Dragon Island. Even their own clansmen couldn't enter and leave at will, let alone humans. However, these two people seemed to have completely ignored those obstacles and directly shattered the void to come here. It was really hard not to be suspicious. It's a long story. Rong Xiu smiled, but his expression was still calm. After that, he gave a simple explanation of what had happened in just a few words. Of course, he directly skipped over many of the details. After that, everyone present quieted down with different expressions on their faces. But obviously, most of them were still suspicious. Even Mao Yang had a surprised look on his face. So you're saying that you somehow came here from the god-slaying mound? Rong Xiu nodded. And I didn't mean to come here. If we offended you, please forgive us, Patriarch Mao Yang. Looking at his incomparably sincere expression, Mao Yang was speechless. He had thought of many possibilities, but this was the only one he didn't think of. This sounded too strange. But if he didn't experience it personally, how could he say such a reason? Moreover, with the strength of these two people, it was impossible for them to quietly break through their defenses and come in directly. In other words, what Rong Xiu said was true. Of course, Mao Yang didn't believe all of it, but he also felt that what Rong Xiu said should be partly true. Mao Yang fell into silence. It was almost impossible for outsiders to verify these things. Whether it was true or not, it was all up to them. Rong Xiu's status was not low, so obviously they couldn't take his life. However, since they had suddenly come here, they had to bear the punishment that they deserved. After a while, Mao Yang said, "Actually, we didn't mean to make things difficult for the two of you. It's just that you interrupted our 1,000 peaks and even stepped on the jade disc that we used for testing. I'm afraid this debt will have to be settled properly." 1,000 peaks? Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment before he quickly came to his senses. No wonder. She was wondering why so many people were here. It turned out that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race was holding the 1,000 Summit. The so-called 1,000 Summit was actually similar to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestral worship ceremony. Every 100 years, the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe would hold a 1,000-peak summit to test the innate talents of the younger generation of the tribe. This could be considered one of the biggest ceremonies in their clan, and it was incomparably important to them. Now that she and Rong Xiu had interrupted them, it was no wonder that they were so angry. This Mao Yang was really good at self-restraint. He was actually able to say these words so calmly. If it was Yi Zhao, suddenly, Chu Liuyue's expression froze. A sense of uneasiness quickly surged into her heart. Since this 1,000-peak summit was similar to the ancestral worship ceremony, then outsiders should not be allowed to casually appear here. She and Rong Xiu had gotten into big trouble. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would definitely not let this matter go so easily. And that jade disc, Chu Luiyue lowered her head to take another look. Clan leader Mao Yang, this jade disc, Mao Yang said indifferently. Actually, this jade disc isn't considered a top-notch treasure. It's just that our tribe only has this one now. After it's damaged, it's extremely difficult to refine another one that's exactly the same. Chu Liuyue's breathing stagnated. Although Mao Yang's tone was very calm, she could also hear the preciousness of this item. It was the only one. And it was a treasure that was specially used for the 1,000-peak summit. And it was crushed by them just like that. If she didn't compensate them properly, she would feel that it wasn't right. However, the two of you didn't do it on purpose. This clan leader, why are you so polite to the two of them? In my opinion, they were clearly doing it on purpose. Mao Yao tried to restrain himself, but in the end, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood up again with a furious expression. He raised his finger and pointed at Chu Luiyue, gritting his teeth as he said word by word, especially this Shangguanyu. They're very sinister and cunning. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? They came directly from the god-slaying tomb thousands of miles away to our divine dragon island. Furthermore, he had coincidentally stepped on the jade disc and shattered it. Everyone nodded in agreement. Although Mao Yao was a little agitated at this moment, what he said was not without reason. This series of events was really too coincidental. It was hard for anyone to believe it. Chu Liuyue's lips curled into a cold arc when she heard this. She turned around and stared at Mao Yao. Senior Mao Yao, you have to have evidence before you speak. Don't you think it's a little too much for you to accuse us without any evidence? If you insist on what you said just now, then do I have reason to suspect that you're abusing your position to avenge a personal grudge? Just because I won the bet and caused you to be heavily injured, you hold a grudge against me and want to take this opportunity to slander us? Mao Yang's face turned pale. You! What a glib tongue. When he first met this Shang Guanyu, he already knew how powerful she was. However, that was when he was at Lingxiao College. Now that she was on Divine Dragon Island, their territory, she was still as arrogant as ever. This was ridiculous. Ridiculous. Mao Yao's chest heaved violently. His hand that was pointing at Chu Liyue trembled slightly. Then, he waved his sleeves fiercely. Then explain yourself. What's going on? If you can give us an explanation and show us evidence, we'll believe you. Otherwise, you're doing this on purpose. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes and felt a little irritated. She also did not expect that she would actually be sent to this Divine Dragon Island. Did they think she wanted to come? She couldn't wait to cut off all contact with the great Phoenix Dragon clan. However, it seemed that this had become an extravagant hope. Mao Yao's words are not without reason. In the silence, Mao Yang spoke again. His expression was still gentle, and there was nothing strange about it. His words, however, gradually became sharper. After all, the Thousand Summit is the grandest event of our clan. Because of this, the entire clan had been working tirelessly so that the 1,000-year summit could be held smoothly. But now, everything has become an illusion. Even if the two of you really didn't mean it, you're not completely without responsibility, right? Of course. Rong Xiu replied calmly. He raised his chin slightly, and his jawline was smooth. There was a smile at the corner of his lips, but there was calmness between his brows. He was just standing there, but his entire body exuded an indescribable noble aura, making people subconsciously look up and submit to him. If we're in the wrong, we'll take responsibility and never shirk responsibility. Digression, Happy Origin Core. Happy first anniversary, Godly Doctor. I hope that everyone will be healthy and happy in the new year. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1732. As soon as he finished speaking, Mao Yao sneered. Bear the responsibility alone? With just you two? What big words. Let's not talk about anything else, just that jade disc alone. Can you compensate us with an identical one? How are you going to bear the responsibility of delaying the 1,000 Peak Summit? Rong Xiu glanced at him, the smile on his lips fading a little. I, Rong Xiu, have always done what I say. There's no need for others to worry about this. Mao Yao's heart felt stifled, and his anger burned even more. This Rong Xiu was not someone to be trifled with. The two of them together could simply infuriate people to death. Mao Yang gave Mao Yao a look. Mao Yao, don't be agitated. Maybe they really have a way. Mao Yao did not dare to disobey his words. He could only snort coldly and swallow the rest of his words. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu and Chu Liyue, his eyes sweeping across the two of them. Actually, we don't want to make a big deal out of this matter. After all, it won't be good for either of us. How about this, if you have a way to repair this jade disc within an hour, we'll forget about the broken jade disc. How about it? As soon as he finished speaking, the huge square became even quieter. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two people in the square. Good wife, suspicion, ridicule, everyone had different expressions, but in the end, they all had the attitude of watching a joke. Because they all knew very well, in this world, there was absolutely no one who could complete this task within an hour. Even the top craftsmen of the human race could not do it. Let alone these two people. Is Patriarch Mao Yang's words true? Rong Xiu seemed to be unaware of the surrounding gazes as he asked faintly. Mao Yang nodded. Of course. In front of so many people, every word he said was carefully considered. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. Good. Since that's the case, then I'll have to ask you and everyone else to wait for an hour for now. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. What did Rong Xiu mean by this? Could it be that he could really restore the jade disc to its original state within an hour? Where did his confidence come from? Chu Luiyue stepped forward and held his hand. Rong Xiu turned around and looked at her with a smile. Their eyes met. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly calmed down. Rong Xiu could do it. Even if no one believed it, she believed it. Rong Xiu indeed had such an ability. Then, Rong Xiu walked to the side and picked up the broken plate. Lend me something. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Rong Xiu said, the corpse of the great phoenix dragon. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. What did Rong Xiu want to do with this thing? Her eyes unconsciously fell on the jade plate that had shattered into several pieces, and a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. This was Divine Dragon Island. It was one thing for them to suddenly appear here, but if they took out the corpse in front of so many people, wouldn't they be looking for trouble? However, looking at Rong Xiu's calm and composed appearance, Chu Luiyue only moved her lips, but in the end, she nodded. With a flick of her wrist, a stream of light flashed. Then, a long skeleton appeared in Chu Luiyue's hand. The skeleton was translucent and glowed with a jade-like luster. However, the moment this thing appeared, the entire square was in an uproar. They were all great phoenix dragons, so they were naturally familiar with the aura of this skeleton. Shengguan Yu. How dare you? Mao Yao's eyes widened in anger as he reprimanded angrily. Even Mao Yang's eyes, which had always been gentle, turned cold at this time. Shengguan Yu, Rong Xiu, what are you trying to do? His voice was low and dignified, and every word fell into the ears like a clap of thunder. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled, and the force in her body instantly began to surge. Rong Xiu held her hand. A gentle and majestic aura flowed into her body, quickly calming the force in her body. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. Although her strength had improved, she was still a high god. Facing a top expert like Mao Yang, she was naturally no match for him. Rong Xiu took the corpse in his hand, then raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. There was a faint smile on his noble and devilish face, and his voice was lazy and carried a hint of indifference. Clan leader Mao Yang, why are you so nervous? I'm just borrowing this corpse to repair the jade disc. He didn't seem to care at all, but every word he said struck at the heart of Mao Yang and the others. Of course, they knew that Shengguan Yu had the corpse of one of their clansmen with her. Moreover, she had used this corpse to reconstruct the physical body of her contracted divine beast. If not for this, Mao Yao would not have barged into Lingxiao College and questioned her. Unfortunately, the outcome of that incident was not very good. Mao Yao lost the bet, and at the same time, he lost the right to continue asking for the corpse. This was a large part of the reason why the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan's attitude towards Mao Yao had changed. If the corpse was not taken out, it would be fine. They could still put on a show of politeness. But now, the corpse was right in front of them. How could they tolerate this? Mao Yang was secretly shocked when he saw that Rong Xiu easily neutralized his coercion. He did not use his full strength just now. He only wanted to put some pressure on them, but he still used 50% of his strength. An ordinary high god expert would definitely not be able to withstand it. However, this did not seem to cause any trouble for Rong Xiu at all. Rong Xiu's strength seemed to be stronger than the rumors. Mao Yang said coldly. But this is the corpse of one of our clansmen. How can you deal with it so casually? This was a slap to the Great Phoenix Dragon clan's face in public. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Clan leader Mao Yang, although this corpse does belong to a senior of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, it's already mine. It's not up to others to decide what I want to do with it, right? This was something he had told Elder Mao Yao back then. Elder Mao Yao, don't you think so? Mao Yao, who was still burning with anger, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat when he heard this. At this moment, he clearly felt countless gazes filled with reproach and resentment fall on him. Mao Yao stammered and tried to appear fierce. What nonsense are you talking about? When did we say that in the bet? Chu Luiyue said with a smile. It seems that you're really forgetful. At that time, we clearly agreed that after I won the bet, this corpse would belong to me, and the Great Phoenix Dragon clan would not pursue it anymore. This naturally means that you no longer have any right to interfere with this matter. There are many witnesses that day. Elder Mao Yao, do you want me to invite a few of them over? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1733. Mao Yao was speechless. Although Chu Liuyue's words were unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Since she had won the bet that day, the skeleton belonged to her. Naturally, it was up to her to decide how to deal with it. Even if it was the skeleton of their Great Phoenix Dragon clan, they still had no right to interfere. At the end of the day, the responsibility for this matter still fell on his head. Whispers came from the surroundings. Elder Mao Yao actually has the nerve to stand up and speak. If he wasn't too incompetent that day and lost the bet, why would we be suffering Shangguanyu's anger for no reason? That's right. Because of a personal mistake, the skeleton of a clansman fell into the hands of others and can't be recovered. This is a big mistake. However, Elder Mao Yao hasn't been punished yet. I really don't know what the clan leader is thinking. Why not? Didn't you see that the clan leader didn't let Elder Mao Yao participate in the Thousand Summit this time? You should know that Elder Mao Yao was an important figure in the previous Thousand Peaks. How can this be? In all these years, there has never been a case where a clansman's skeleton has fallen outside and we have no right to recover it. If not for Elder Mao Yao's negligence this time, we wouldn't have to be so sullen. If I were him, I wouldn't have the face to come to the Thousand Summit today. All kinds of discussions entered Mao Yao's ears one after another, causing his face to turn green and extremely embarrassed. He wished he could find a hole to hide in. He knew that this matter would have a big impact on him, but he wouldn't say it out loud. Even the clan leader Mao Yang didn't reprimand him harshly. He just quietly distributed the power in his hands. Although Mao Yao felt terrible, he knew that this was the last bit of face left for him. As time passed, this matter would naturally fade away. However, he didn't expect Shangguanyu and Rongxiu to come. Furthermore, he had taken out the skeleton right in front of them. Wasn't this exposing his background in front of everyone? When these clansmen saw the skeleton, they clearly didn't intend to continue enduring. Mao Yao didn't need to think to know that his days in the clan would be even more difficult. And if Rongxiu did something to the skeleton, Mao Yao felt that he would become the sinner of the entire race. He almost couldn't catch his breath. His body swayed, and his face was extremely pale. Chu Luiyue asked with concern. Elder Mao Yao, your complexion doesn't look too good. Could it be that you haven't fully recovered from your previous injuries? As she spoke, she frowned slightly and revealed a look of confusion. That shouldn't be the case. I was quite restrained back then. Mao Yao's chest tightened and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Restrain? What did she mean by that? Could it be that she had been merciful to him back then? What would everyone think if they heard this? You. Mao Yao was infuriated. This Shangguanyu is clearly doing this on purpose. Chu Liuyue's smile was gentle and sincere. Do you want to rest first? I see that Patriarch Mao Yang and the others are all here. Even if you leave for a while, it won't have much of an impact, right? Mao Yao's vision turned black, and his body began to tremble. Mao Yang frowned. Mao Yao's appearance was simply too embarrassing. If it weren't for his seniority and his contributions to the clan, he would have been severely held accountable for the skeleton's incident this time. He originally thought that after experiencing this setback, Mao Yao would restrain himself a little. He didn't expect that not only did he not improve at all, he even became even more impatient. Mao Yang lowered his eyes, hiding the cold light in his eyes. Patriarch Mao Yang, don't worry. I want to use these bones to repair the jade disc, but I have no intention of destroying it. Rong Xiu said with a faint smile. This was the Divine Dragon Island, and he wouldn't go so far as to completely offend the great Phoenix Dragon clan here. Hearing this, Mao Yang's tensed face finally relaxed a little. He stared at Rong Xiu for a while, and finally nodded, then please. Within the ruins of God, the originally gloomy and oppressive pressure seemed to have lessened by quite a bit. Dumpling and the rest headed outside at an extremely fast speed. Even the weakest, Chu Ning, could barely keep up with the rest after borrowing Shengguan Jing's divine artifact. Not long after, they arrived at the border of the ruins of God and stood in front of the Scarlet Soul Forest again. With their previous experience and the fact that there were no outsiders to disturb them, they passed through very smoothly this time. In the evening, the group walked out of the Scarlet Soul Forest and completely left the ruins of God. When they took the last step, Shengguan Jing couldn't help but look back. It was already evening, and the afterglow of the setting sun covered the entire Scarlet Soul Forest with a faint layer of golden light. Black trees stood in the forest, and the dark red leaves swayed in the wind. He had never thought that he would actually come here again and completely resolve the grudge between him and Yu Hongshan. He wondered where Yu was now and whether she was safe. At that thought, he retracted his gaze and looked at Dumpling. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else present was also waiting for Dumpling. Out of all of them, she was the only one who could lead them to Rong Xiu and his wife. Dumpling crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand, deep in thought. After a while, she raised her chubby little hand and pointed in a certain direction. Over there. Without hesitation, they immediately followed Tuanzi and ran forward. Time passed slowly, and it seemed to be especially unbearable. But fortunately, Dumpling and Chu Luyue had always been sensing each other. This also proved that at the very least, Chu Luyue should still be safe at this time. And the closer they got, the stronger Dumpling's sensing ability became. The distance between the two parties was obviously shrinking. This made everyone feel more at ease. However, gradually, Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu both felt that something was amiss. Elder Yi Yu lowered his head to look. At this moment, they were passing by a wasteland. The terrain here was a little special. On the yellow wasteland, there were ravines crisscrossing. Looking down from the sky, these ravines of varying depth stretched across the boundless wasteland, grand and desolate. This place, Elder Yi Yu finally couldn't help but move to Yi Zhao's side and whisper. Clan leader, don't you think this place seems a little strange? Ordinary wastelands don't have such scenery. In his impression, there seemed to be only one place in the Divine Ruins world that looked like this. Yi Zhao seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and nodded affirmatively. You're right. This is indeed the 13 slopes. Although Elder Yi Yu had already expected this, he was still shocked when he heard such an affirmative answer. The so-called 13 slopes referred to this wasteland. It was said that 10,000 years ago, 13 ancestors of the great Phoenix Dragon had passed away here together. After they died, the energy of heaven and earth here shook, causing this wasteland to become what it was today. Therefore, the descendants called it the 13 slopes. But the key point was, this was the territory of the great Phoenix Dragon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1734. How did we end up here? Elder Yu's expression froze, and he was a little worried. The relationship between the two ancient divine beast clans had always been very subtle. They were on opposite sides, but they had never really fought. They were polite, but they were not willing to submit to each other. They had been fighting openly and secretly for many years. However, there was always an unwritten rule between them: they would never cause trouble in each other's territory. This was the bottom line of both sides. Once someone broke it, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. If those old guys from the Great Phoenix Dragon knew that they were here, there would be a lot of trouble. This was also one of the reasons why Elder EU felt uneasy. He looked up at Dumpling, who was in front of him. She seemed to be unaware and still looked excited. If we continue forward, I'm afraid we will reach Divine Dragon Island, right? Elder EU was very worried. He had never been to Divine Dragon Island, but they had already arrived at the 13th slope. He knew that the Great Phoenix Dragon's nest was in front of them. Yi Zhao's brows moved slightly. The 13th slope is only considered the periphery of Divine Dragon Island. It's not considered a violation of the agreement. However, we can't go any further. Especially when he had come here with EU. If the Great Phoenix Dragon and the others knew about this, who knew what they would say about them? Dumpling. Yi Zhao suddenly called out to Dumpling. Dumpling stopped and turned back, only to see Yi Zhao and Elder EU standing on the spot. Grandpa Leader, what's wrong? Dumpling asked in confusion. Shangguan Jing and the others also stopped and turned back when they heard the commotion. Yi Zhao stared at Dumpling for a while and asked. Dumpling, are you sure that Shangguan Yu is in front? Dumpling nodded in confusion. Yes. Hadn't everyone been following her all this time? Why did Grandpa Leader suddenly ask about this? Yi Zhao paused. Shangguan Jing saw that his expression was a little strange and could not help but ask. Leader Yi Zhao, is there something wrong? Yi Zhao shook his head. It's nothing. However, EU and I are unable to continue forward. We can only send Dumpling here. Shangguan Jing and the others were shocked. Dumpling also widened her eyes and asked in puzzlement, what are you talking about? Grandpa Patriarch, why? Yi Zhao raised his hand and pointed downwards. This is the 13 slopes. It's considered the territory of the Great Phoenix Dragon race. If they passed through here, it was very likely that the Divine Dragon Island would be in front of them. EU and I have special statuses. Naturally, we can't go further in. When he said that, everyone looked at each other. If that was the case, then there was really no other way. Dumpling pursed her lips in disappointment and reluctance. Although she hadn't spent a lot of time with Grandpa Patriarch and Grandpa Fifth Elder, she could feel that they were genuinely good to her. Now that they were suddenly separated, she naturally felt a little upset. She scratched her hair bun. When Dumpling finds Ayu, I'll go back to visit you and Grandpa Fifth Elder. Yi Zhao looked at her sincere and clean big eyes, as well as her solemn vow, and his heart warmed. Okay. Then Grandpa Patriarch will wait for you. Elder EU was so touched that tears welled up in his eyes. He hurriedly said, Me too, me too. Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely wait for you. If you want to see Grandpa Fifth Elder, just send a message over. No matter where Dumpling is, Grandpa Fifth Elder will definitely be at your beck and call. His words finally made Dumpling burst with joy, and a bright smile bloomed on her face again. It's a deal. After that, Yi Zhao and Elder EU coaxed Dumpling for a while more before they really bade farewell and watched Dumpling and the others leave. Looking at Dumpling's gradually disappearing figure, Elder EU couldn't help but ask, Patriarch, can you really be at ease? After all, Dumpling is the young lord. Once she enters Divine Dragon Island, her aura will definitely be detected. What if those people from Divine Dragon Island make things difficult for Dumpling? Yi Zhao's face was expressionless. We have to be at ease even if we can't. If we really go, things will only become more troublesome. Therefore, they could only make such a choice. As long as Dumpling goes, they will definitely make things difficult for her. Fortunately, Dumpling is still young, and she has a contractual relationship with Shangguan Yu. If she wants to go to Shanghai Yu, there is no better reason than that. Even if they want to do something to Dumpling, they have to think of a suitable reason to do so. Originally, they had been brooding over the fact that Dumpling had a contractual relationship with Shangguan Yu. However, from the looks of it today, it wasn't all bad. Elder Yu's heart finally calmed down a little. Now, we can only hope that everything goes well for Dumpling and the others. Yi Zhao was silent for a moment before he spoke again. That Rongxiu. Do you know what his background is? Elder Yu didn't expect him to suddenly bring this up. After being stunned for a moment, he said, "Don't you already know this? He is the saint of Yuntian Tower." Yi Zhao shook his head. What I mean is other identities. Elder Yu suddenly thought of something. Are you suspicious of Rongxiu because of Nan Yifan's reaction earlier? Yi Zhao nodded. There was nothing to deny about this. He did feel that Nan Yifan's attitude towards Rongxiu was very strange. The Nan family's power was stronger than Yuntian Tower. As the head of the family, Nan Yifan had no reason to be so afraid of Rongxiu. This. I really don't know. Rongxiu has been famous in Yuntian Tower for the past few years, but I don't think I've heard that he has any other background other than being the saint of Yuntian Tower. Why don't I go back and look into it? Elder Yu asked tentatively. Yi Zhao was about to nod when he suddenly paused, as if he was hesitating about something. After pondering for a long time, he waved his hand. Forget it. Since he didn't say anything, we don't have to deliberately inquire. These things will naturally be known when it's time to know. He took one last look in the direction where Dumpling and the others left. Those figures had completely disappeared from his sight. A breeze blew, fluttering the corners of the two's clothes. Yi Zhao lowered his eyes, hiding the emotions in his eyes, and turned around. It's time for us to go back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1735. Divine Dragon Island. The square in front of the Great Void Temple was completely silent. Countless pairs of eyes fell on the two figures standing in the middle. Jealousy, suspicion, indifference. Even without looking up, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the hostility in the eyes of the surrounding people. She lifted her eyes slightly and looked at Rongxiu in front of her. He was sitting cross-legged with a calm expression. It was as if the gazes of the surrounding people could not affect him at all. The broken jade plate was placed in front of him. As for his hand, it was holding onto the skeleton. He waved his wrist gently and the skeleton flew up lightly and floated quietly in front of him. Then, a cluster of golden flames suddenly surged out from Rongxiu's hand. Boom! The flames were bright and scorching, jumping around happily like fairies. Rongxiu's mind moved and the cluster of flames flew out from his hand and landed on one end of the skeleton. Seeing this scene, the crowd could not help but become restless. The corners of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched violently. Burning the skeleton of their clansman in front of the great phoenix dragon, only Rongxiu would do such a thing. Mao Yang's dignified eyes quickly scanned the crowd. The restless voices quickly calmed down. However, those pairs of eyes that were surging with waves clearly indicated that their hearts were far from as calm as they appeared on the surface. Chu Luiyue's brows twitched slightly and she quickly glanced at Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table. She had long heard that Mao Yang was highly respected in the clan. Today, she saw that he was indeed worthy of his reputation. Although he looked kind and polite, if he did not use ruthless methods, he would not have been able to sit firmly in the position of clan leader. Almost at the instant Chu Luiyue looked over, Mao Yang was acutely aware of this point and directly looked over. The two of them looked at each other. In the silence, there seemed to be an undercurrent surging. Chu Luiyue's lips curled slightly and revealed a polite smile. Then, she calmly looked away. After a short while, the feeling of having a knife on his back disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief and fixed her eyes on Rongxiu. The cluster of golden flames burned from one end of the skeleton and gradually spread to the other end. Wherever it passed, the skeleton seemed to become more sparkling and translucent. She could vaguely see a small amount of transparent liquid flowing slowly inside. A majestic aura spread out from the skeleton. A trace of surprise flashed across Chu Luiyue's heart. Although she had only used 2 wing bones when she reconstructed Zi Chen's body, she had basically extracted all the bloodline energy in the skeleton. She had originally thought that she had extracted the purest power of the skeleton's bloodline. But now, it seemed that there was still a remnant of the bloodline power of the skeleton. More importantly, Rongxiu had so easily dug out the power hidden in every inch of the skeleton. This was something that even Chu Luiyue could not do. Chu Luiyue stared at the burning golden flames. She had always known that the golden flames on Rongxiu's body were not ordinary, but she had never thought about it carefully before. But now, she suddenly felt a little curious. Because she realized that the power of the flames did not seem to be inferior to hers. After all, she could summon two flames. One was the scarlet gold flame of the scarlet gold heavenly phoenix, and the other was the transparent karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron. These two flames were extraordinarily powerful, not to mention that they were supported by the power of the transparent water droplet in her body. No, it should be called a zither score. After experiencing those things in the god-slaying mound, she realized that this thing on her was a precious treasure. The golden flames on Rongxiu's body were not inferior in comparison. Just as Chu Luiyue was thinking about these questions, the golden flames had already burned to the other end of the skeleton. Rongxiu raised his hand, and the flames silently separated from the skeleton. At the same time, the transparent liquid in the skeleton slowly seeped out and condensed into a ball the size of a longan. This ball was surrounded and roasted by the golden flames. Gradually, a shadow seemed to emerge from it. Chu Luiyue stood closer, so she could see it more clearly than the others. At first, the shadow was just a blurry ball, but gradually, as time passed and the golden flames condensed, the shadow became clearer and clearer. Finally, at a certain moment, the shadow revealed its true appearance. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. It was actually a dragon. A great phoenix dragon. Although it was very small, Chu Luiyue could tell at first glance that it was indeed a great phoenix dragon. Roar! A deep dragon roar resounded through the world. The pressure was heavy, covering the sky and the earth. Chu Luiyue was shocked. The onlookers were also shocked. They did not expect Rongxiu to be able to refine the remaining bloodline power. Then, Rongxiu flicked his finger. The golden flames wrapped around it and quickly pounced on the broken jade disc. The flames were bright. Blazing. It instantly surrounded the jade disc. Almost at the same time, the great phoenix dragon's shadow and the water droplet began to move at an even faster speed. Then, bang! A slight cracking sound could be heard. The water droplet turned into countless tiny water droplets and splashed on the jade disc. It was as if there was an invisible thread that began to string the broken pieces together perfectly. Under the strong and shocking dragon's might, the cracks on the jade disc began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The golden flames burned even more fiercely. Vaguely, Chu Luiyue saw that the cracks on the jade disc were disappearing. Not long after, Rongxiu's bony finger tapped lightly. The golden flames flew back instantly. A jade disc floated quietly in the air. All the cracks on it had disappeared. It was as clean as new and flawless. Rongxiu stood up and kept the jade disc in his hand. Then, he raised his eyes and looked at Mao Yang. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. Clan leader Mao Yang, I did not disappoint you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1736. The entire place was dead silent. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the stiff and cold atmosphere. Impossible. There must be something fishy going on. Rongxiu glanced sideways with an indifferent expression. Elder Mao Yao, you're not in good health, so you shouldn't be so agitated, right? If you accidentally faint, whose fault is it? Mao Yao was furious. He finally saw through it. These two people were sharper than the other. If he spoke a few more words with them, he might die from anger. Mao Yao took a deep breath and finally realized something. He was no match for the two of them in a war of words. Thus, he stopped arguing with Rong Xiu and turned to look at Mao Yang. Patriarch. Others may not know, but you know it best. That jade disc is a treasure of our clan. Once it shatters, it can't be repaired within an hour. Rong Xiu must have used some kind of trick to make it look as good as new on the surface. You mustn't be fooled by him. Chu Luiyue said with a smile that was not a smile. Oh. Elder Mao Yao, you mean? Patriarch Mao Yang raised this condition to deliberately make things difficult for us? Mao Yao was speechless. You. Enough. Mao Yang stood up, and his voice was finally tinged with anger. He frowned and looked at Mao Yao. Whether it's true or not, I will personally check it. Elder Mao Yao doesn't need to worry about it. He really didn't know what was wrong with Mao Yao. Ever since the failure in Shangguanyu, he seemed to have become impulsive and irritable. He couldn't do anything right, but he was good at spoiling things. Mao Yao also felt as if he was possessed. It was as if as long as those two were involved, he would become irrational and even make mistakes. His situation in the clan was already difficult enough. If this continued, it would be a problem if he could continue to stay in the clan. His face was pale, and he swallowed the rest of his words with an embarrassed expression. Mao Yang looked at Rong Xiu. I wonder if you can let me take a look at this thing? Rong Xiu nodded. Of course. As he spoke, he casually tossed it into the air. The jade disc flew towards Mao Yang. Mao Yang took the item and glanced at Rong Xiu. The young man was dressed in a snow-white robe. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, and his expression was calm and composed. He seemed to be very confident. Mao Yang frowned, and then he looked at the jade disc in his hand and carefully observed it. This was a treasure of their clan. As the clan leader, he was naturally the most familiar with it. The crowd quieted down again. Everyone focused their attention and looked at Mao Yang, waiting for his conclusion. In fact, most people didn't quite believe it. Their thoughts were similar to Mao Yao's. They all felt that Rong Xiu must have used some special method to make it look exactly the same from the outside. Rong Xiu did not seem to care about this. He handed the skeleton to Chu Luiyue and said with a smile, "Many thanks you, Chu Luiyue took the item and smiled. Her eyes flickered, and there was a fine but bright light in her eyes. In fact, other than providing this skeleton, she did not help him with anything else. In the end, it was Rong Xiu himself who was powerful enough. If it was someone else, it would be difficult to do so. After a while, Mao Yang raised his head and looked at Rong Xiu with a complicated gaze. Everyone's hearts were also in suspense. Clan leader's expression is not very good. I think there's something wrong with that thing. It's all expected. From the beginning to the end, Rong Xiu only used half the time. It's impossible to completely repair the jade disc in such a short time. I want to see if they can still be so calm later. Low murmurs of discussion could be heard from both sides. Rong Xiu did not seem to hear it. With a smile on his lips, he looked at Mao Yang and asked, "Clan leader Mao Yang, how is it?" His voice was low and pleasing to the ear, and it carried a calming force. Mao Yang was silent for a while before he said, "This jade disc has indeed been restored to its original state." As soon as his words fell, everyone was shocked. The huge square was instantly dead silent. Almost everyone's expression froze on their faces. For a moment, they did not know how to react. Clan leader said, it had indeed been restored to its original state. Didn't that mean that Rong Xiu really only used half the time to complete their request? No. How did he do it? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. It's indeed not easy to do this. But fortunately, Yu has the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. With the help of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power, repairing the jade disc will naturally be much easier. This jade disc belonged to them in the first place. What else was more suitable than their own bloodline power to do this? All in all I did was transfer the bloodline power and the skeleton to the jade disc. This way, it shouldn't be considered an offense to clan leader Mao Yang, right? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. From the beginning, he had said that he wouldn't damage the skeleton at all. Now, he could be considered to have done what he said. His words caused everyone to fall silent. These words didn't seem to be wrong. Originally, they thought that if Rongxiu really did something, they could use this against him. However, what he did this time was indeed extremely benevolent, and there was no place to attack. This made people unable to find a reason to scold him even if they wanted to. Mao Yang was actually holding back a bellyful of anger. Although the jade disc had been perfectly restored, he had only wanted to take this opportunity to make things difficult for the two of them. Who would have thought that Rongxiu would actually do it? Mao Yang only felt as if he had punched cotton, and his entire person was extremely sullen. However, his self-restraint was extremely good. Even if his emotions were surging in his heart, his face was still expressionless. He sighed softly. The holy son of the Yuntian Tower is indeed as powerful as the rumors say. No, it should be said that the outside world still underestimated you. Although this child was young, his thoughts were deep. They had been here for so long, but he couldn't guess Rongxiu's thoughts at all. Moreover, he faintly felt that Rongxiu should have other trump cards. This person. I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. Rongxiu gladly accepted Mao Yang's insincere praise. You flatter me. In fact, I just wanted to turn today's matter into a small matter, and a small matter into nothing. We damaged this jade disc, so it's only right to repair it and compensate. He paused. Now that the jade disc has been restored, and we have already apologized before, then you, and I can leave now, right? Mao Yang narrowed his eyes. The two of them looked at each other. In an instant, sparks flew. The two-side strength clashed silently. Mao Yang handed the jade disc to an elder next to him and said slowly, I'm afraid this will be a little difficult. Rongxiu's eyebrows moved slightly, and the smile on the corner of his lips was stained with a layer of frost. Oh. Digression. The Xiaoxiang coins reward for the first day of New Year's Day has been issued. The list of December's comments and the 3 days of New Year's Day's comments will be announced after the event. Speaking of which, Dumpling and Biyao are so good looking I want to flood the surrounding comment section. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1737. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Rongxiu asked faintly. Mao Yang had one hand behind his back, and his expression was still calm and gentle. However, at this moment, in the eyes of Chu Luyue and Rongxiu, his face became stiff and cold. Don't misunderstand, we definitely didn't mean to cause trouble for you. We're all very happy and gratified that the jade disc has been repaired. It's just that, the matter isn't over yet, so I'm afraid we can't let you two leave for the time being. He raised his chin slightly, and there was a hint of authority in his voice. Other than this jade disc, it's also true that the two of you appeared out of nowhere and interrupted our 1,000 peaks. More importantly, for 10,000 years, no human has ever taken a step into Divine Dragon Island. However, not only did the two of you come today, but you also barged into the Great Void Temple. This debt. I'm afraid we still have to settle it properly. Chu Luyue suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Mao Yang's eyes darkened. Shengguanyu, what are you laughing at? Halfway through his words, he was suddenly interrupted. He hadn't had such an experience for many years. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Luyue's laughter made him feel very unhappy. Chu Luyue blinked. No, I was just thinking that since you didn't want to let us leave so easily from the beginning, then there's no need to say these complicated and lengthy pleasantries, is there? No matter whether Rongxiu succeeded or failed, they wouldn't let it go. After all, they didn't plan to let Rongxiu do this from the beginning. Unfortunately, they underestimated Rongxiu. Therefore, at this time, they could only use such words to forcefully stop them. Mao Yang didn't expect Chu Luyue to be so straightforward, and finally, his face couldn't hold it anymore. He stared at Chu Luyue for a while, and then suddenly laughed, but there was no smile on his face. You're in the wrong in this matter. Why now, don't we even have the right to pursue responsibility? Chu Liuyue's smile didn't change, and her eyes curved. Of course. What I mean is, if you have any other conditions, just say them all. Our time is precious, so let's get straight to the point. Mao Yang's hands in his sleeves. He finally realized that Shangguan didn't play by the rules. Those things were indeed of no use to her. Rong Xiu, who was at the side, was clearly on her side. These two people. It's really not easy. After thinking of this point, Mao Yang became much more. He pondered for a moment and said, let's not beats. If you want to leave this place, it's simple, erase all memories related to this place. Anything related to the Divine Dragon Island must not be taken out by them. Rong Xiu squinted his eyes. A cold smile appeared on Chu Liuyue's lips. She knew it wouldn't be over so easily. What do you mean, clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows slightly. These memories belong to us. How do you want to erase them? Mao Yang's expression was indifferent. We have our own ways. You just have to do as we say. Chu Liyue sneered in her heart. It's easy to say. Isn't this the same as handing our lives over to them? Only a fool would agree. Rong Xiu said, Clan leader Mao Yang, we can't agree to your request. Mao Yang had expected such an answer from the two of them. His expression didn't change, and his attitude was firm. Actually, we don't want to do this, but there's really no other way. It's fine if you don't agree. When you think it through and are willing to agree to this condition, we'll let you go. Rong Xiu's aura instantly became dangerous. Clan leader Mao Yang, do you mean that if we don't agree, we'll be trapped here forever? Mao Yang seemed to chuckle. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon clan rarely interacts with the human race, this is not a difficult matter for us. His words didn't hide his arrogance at all. This was the confidence of an ancient divine beast. Divine Dragon Island was their territory. Wasn't it a piece of cake to deal with two humans? If it weren't for the fact that Rong Xiu had an extraordinary status in the Divine Ruins world, they wouldn't have wasted so much time and energy. Therefore, to Mao Yang and the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, their actions were already quite restrained and polite. Both sides were in a stalemate. The air was cold and silent. At this moment, a person walked over quickly with a nervous expression, clan leader. Outside Divine Dragon Island, a few humans were approaching. Mao Yang frowned slightly. For this kind of matter, you can just deal with it according to the usual rules. Why do you need to interfere? Under normal circumstances, very few humans would come here. On one hand, they didn't dare to. On the other hand, there were very few people who knew the location of Divine Dragon Island. Occasionally, some people would accidentally come here, and the guards below would basically chase them away. If there were any daring people, they would just kill them. Logically speaking, this kind of matter shouldn't alarm clan leader Mao Yang. The guard who came to report instantly broke out in cold sweat. How could he not know these rules? But the key point was, the people who came this time were not ordinary. Moreover, clan leader, among those people, there seems to be a crimson gold sky phoenix. Mao Yang's expression turned stern. What did you say? Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he turned around to look. That description really sounded like, everyone in the square also looked at each other and became restless. It can't be. There's actually a crimson gold sky phoenix so daring to barge into Divine Dragon Island? Could it be that they're courting death? We don't have much contact with them, and we won't easily step into their territory. What's going on today? What's wrong with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? Or, are they deliberately looking for trouble? Everyone was discussing animatedly. Obviously, the arrival of this Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix had caused quite a stir in their hearts. It wasn't fear, but vigilance and suspicion. The two clans had always maintained a delicate balance, and whoever wanted to break it would have to pay a huge price. Mao Yang said in a deep voice, "What's going on? Tell me in detail." That person hurriedly bowed and recounted the matter in detail. Mao Yang and everyone else's expression changed again and again. "You're saying that the crimson gold sky phoenix is a little girl?" That person lowered his head even more, and his whole body was covered in cold sweat. "I'm not sure, but the aura of that girl is undoubtedly that of a crimson gold sky phoenix." "How is this possible?" The two great ancient divine beasts had to reach adulthood before they could transform into human form. Suddenly, Mao Yang thought of something, and his gaze turned to Chu Luyue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1738. He recalled that he had indeed received some news before. When Sheng Guanyu left the Phoenix God Mountain, he brought a 3 or 4-year-old girl with him. At that time, he had thought about it for a long time, but he still couldn't get an answer. But now, a ridiculous and bold guess appeared in Mao Yang's mind. A look of deep shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be, looks like Dumpling is here? Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. The ones who came with Dumpling should be Taizu, Master, and Father. Their movements were really fast. Chu Liuyue's heart, which was originally hanging in the air, was half relieved. Originally, she was still worried about them. Now that she heard that they were here, she naturally felt more at ease. On second thought, she guessed that Yi Zhao and Elder Yi Yu shouldn't have come together. Otherwise, the Divine Dragon Island would have been in chaos. After all, those two had special identities, so this was the most suitable choice. Hearing Chu Liuyue's words, Mao Yang's heart sank. As expected. That so-called 3 or 4-year-old girl was definitely the crimson gold heavenly phoenix that Sheng Guanyu had contracted. They went to the Phoenix God Mountain. Not only did they not receive any punishment, they even helped the crimson gold heavenly phoenix transform into a human form. Mao Yang's mind raced, and his face turned gloomy. All these years, he had never heard of a young ancient divine beast that could successfully transform into a human form. How did that little girl do it? The biggest possibility was that the power of her bloodline was extremely powerful. But as for how outstanding it was, even Mao Yang didn't dare to be sure. After all, such a thing had never happened in the great Phoenix Dragon clan. This made him feel bewildered and aggrieved. At the same time, it also made him even more puzzled. Sheng Guanyu was here, but that crimson gold heavenly phoenix and a few other humans came over in such a short period of time. It was very likely that there was a contract between them. But how was that possible? Yi Zhao definitely wouldn't agree. He had always been prejudiced against humans, and he would even despise them if they spoke an extra word. How could he allow his people to maintain a contract with Sheng Guanyu? Mao Yang suppressed the many emotions in his heart, but his expression did not change. "Are you certain that there is only one crimson gold heavenly phoenix?" If someone had secretly followed them here, that person nodded and cautiously said, "This subordinate has already investigated carefully. There are no traces or auras of other crimson gold heavenly phoenixes in the vicinity of Divine Dragon Island. Furthermore, she had transformed into the appearance of a little girl." The appearance of the crimson gold celestial phoenix was already enough to shock them. When they saw that she was only 3 or 4 years old, their jaws almost dropped in shock. Only then did he return to report in a fluster. Mao Yang fell silent. Chu Luyue smiled. "Clan leader Mao Yang, Dumpling, and the others have personally come to take us back. Are you still not going to let them go?" Mao Yang gave her a deep look. Ever since Mao Yao suffered a loss at the hands of this woman, he knew that she was not a simple person. At that time, when he heard that she had left Phoenix Mountain unscathed, he was even more determined. It was just that, only now did he realize that he had still underestimated her. This Sheng Guanyu looked very young. Her eyes were clear and clean, and she always had a smile on her face. In fact, she was very thoughtful and had many secrets hidden in her body. "I can't underestimate her," Mao Yang thought so and said indifferently, "It's their business that they are here. As for whether to let you go, I've already made it very clear just now. You can think about it yourselves. Although his voice was calm, his attitude was very firm. It was obvious that he would not change his previous suggestion. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Mao Yang looked at the person who reported the news. Go back to them and tell them that the clan is holding the 1000 Summit. Everyone is busy and it's not convenient to entertain them. If it had been anyone else from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who came rashly, he would not have been so polite. However, the one who came was Shengguan Yu's contracted magical beast. Moreover, she seemed to be very young. If he used force and word got out, outsiders would probably say that he was bullying a child. Therefore, after thinking about it, Mao Yang decided to just shut them out. Yes. After receiving the order, the person quickly left. However, the crowd still had different expressions on their faces. Even Mao Yang did not understand the reason behind this, let alone them. In fact, they really wanted to find out what was going on. Mao Yang raised his hand. Men, please go to 7 Lotus Mountain to rest. I'm afraid you two will have to suffer during this period of time. When you think it through, we can continue the discussion. It's the same. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 tall men walked up from the side. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. They were going to put them under house arrest. Just as she was about to say something, Rong Xiu's finger suddenly brushed across her palm. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. She turned her head to look. Rong Xiu's calm and deep eyes were clear. She could not see anything wrong with them. She swallowed the rest of her words. Rong Xiu looked at Mao Yang and smiled faintly. Then I'll have to impose on you for this period of time. Mao Yang's chest tightened. Rong Xiu did not seem to care about his threats at all. He even wanted to enjoy himself here as a guest. Mao Yang felt a little disgusted. Whether it was Rong Xiu or Shengguan Yu, they gave him a feeling that he could not control them. This made him very unhappy. He snorted coldly. I hope you two can think it through soon. After all, there are still people waiting for you outside. Outside Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling and the others finally found the place after a long journey. At this time, they were standing on a long and seemingly endless coast. In front of them was an endless dark blue sea. There was a huge barrier where the sky and the earth met. The pressure was very strong. Needless to say, that was Divine Dragon Island. Dumpling looked over from time to time. Shengguan Jing and the others looked a little serious. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to get people from Divine Dragon Island. At this time, a figure flew out of the barrier. They were shocked. They immediately became nervous. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1739. When they had just arrived, it was this man who had stopped them. After Nan Su Huai explained his identity and purpose, the man turned around and returned to Divine Dragon Island, saying that he needed to ask for instructions. They didn't expect him to return so quickly. Dumpling glanced behind the man and was disappointed when she didn't see Chu Luiyue. Nan Su Huai and the rest also felt uneasy. The man stopped in the middle of the sea and stood in the air. He looked at them solemnly and then conveyed Mao Yang's words. As soon as she finished her words, Tuanzi was furious. What do you mean by this? You're not letting us in to see, are you? The man glanced at Tuanzi meaningfully and looked her up and down for a long time before he said, You're still young. Although you're young, you're still a descendant of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Don't you know the rules? It was already too much for them to appear here, let alone let them in. If it wasn't for the 1000 Summit and the fact that this little girl was very young and was Shengguan Yu's contracted fiend beast, how could the clan leader let them off so easily? I'll give you one last piece of advice. This isn't a place where you can come. Leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Dumpling was even angrier. What did you say? She had painstakingly found her way here and was finally about to see Yu. How could these people not let her in? She would never agree to it. Dumpling wanted to say something, but Nan Suhui suddenly persuaded her. Dumpling, we're here to look for you, not to cause trouble. No matter how much they wanted to see the two of them, the great Phoenix Dragon clan had already expressed their attitude. If they were to force it, they would lose more than they gained. Even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to cause trouble on Divine Dragon Island. Hearing this, Tuanzi finally restrained herself. She wasn't afraid of other things, but she really didn't want to cause trouble for Yu. She stomped her feet angrily and turned her head away angrily. Nan Suwai took a step forward and stood in front of Dumpling, cupping his fists politely. Actually, we didn't come here with any other intentions. Since it's not convenient to disturb them now, then. I wonder if you can reveal if they're safe and sound? As long as we know this, we can leave with peace of mind. Nan Suhui was the dean of Lingxiao College and had a high status. Now that he spoke politely and courteously, the person opposite him didn't want to offend him and his expression softened. Of course they're fine. They just need to stay in our clan for a while to deal with some matters. When the matter was over, they would leave. Of course, he couldn't reveal the real reason. Nan Suhui furrowed his brows. Just now, when this person urged them to leave, he felt that something was wrong, and now it seemed that it was true. It seemed like Rong Xiao and Shengguan Yu wouldn't be leaving Divine Dragon Island anytime soon. It was obvious that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would not let them off so easily if they barged in. There was an 80% chance that they were trapped here. Shengguan Jing suddenly said. If that's the case, let's go first. Tuanzi was just about to say, no, when Shengguan Jing gently patted her hair bun. Dumpling, be good. Dumpling was very smart. She had already sensed that the atmosphere was a little strange. After thinking for a while, she finally pouted and nodded. Then, the few of them bade farewell and turned to leave. However, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race didn't seem to trust them and kept staring at them. After walking for a long distance, the feeling of being spied on finally disappeared. At this time, they were basically far away from Divine Dragon Island. Nan Suwai looked back with a solemn expression. It seems that the two of them aren't in a good situation. For so many years, no human had stepped onto Divine Dragon Island. Now that the two of them suddenly broke in and happened to be at the so-called Thousand Peaks, they were definitely in trouble. Dumpling was anxious and worried. What should we do? Will Yu and the others be in danger? I saw that the person just now was very fierce. The other people of their race must not be any better. Nan Suwai comforted her. Dumpling, you don't have to worry about this for the time being. Rong Xiao and you, are not ordinary people. Even the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race wouldn't dare to act recklessly. Moreover, Rong Xiao was there. Nan Suwai wasn't worried that they would be in danger. He just felt that this matter would be very troublesome. Dumpling heard his calm and determined tone and unconsciously felt more at ease. She nodded as if she understood. Then, she looked in the direction of Divine Dragon Island with hesitation. Then, are we really going to leave like this? She didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay and go to Divine Dragon Island to find Yu. Nan Suwai smiled. Of course we can't leave like this. We just have to change our method. The defense of Divine Dragon Island is already very strong. Now that they are holding the Thousand Peak Summit, it will only be more strict. It's as difficult as ascending to the heavens for them to enter openly. Shengguan Jing frowned. That's right. After this incident, they will only be more vigilant against us. If it were any other place, we might be able to give it a try. But Divine Dragon Island, it's really impossible. He and Nan Suhui were among the top experts in the Divine Ruins world. Although Chu Ning's realm was low, he had an extremely rare indestructible divine body. Dumpling was even more so. She was the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. When the few of them worked together, their strength was absolutely indisputable. Ordinary people were no match for them. Even if there were many notorious and dangerous places, they could still enter them. Shang Guanjing originally thought that with Dumpling leading the way, they would definitely be able to find Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu smoothly. When he was sent to the northern region of the primitive desolation, didn't he also survive? But he never expected that the two of them would be sent directly to Divine Dragon Island. This was a huge problem for them. Unless the Great Phoenix Dragon clan took the initiative to release them, otherwise. Dumpling raised her head and looked at them. Even if she was not afraid of anything, she knew that this matter was very troublesome. She pulled Nan Suhuai's clothes. Grandpa Dean, you must have a way, right? Although everyone was very worried about this matter, she always felt that Grandpa Dean seemed to be exceptionally calm and steady. Nan Suhuai was silent for a moment. Now is the time when the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan is most vigilant. It's not suitable for us to take action. Let's wait here for a while and see what happens. This was indeed the most suitable method now. Dumpling nodded. Shang Guanjing's frown deepened. Previously, because of the Great Phoenix Dragon skeleton, Yu could be considered to have formed a grudge with them. This time, I'm afraid they won't let it go so easily. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1740. Of course, the Great Phoenix Dragon and the rest were still brooding over this matter. Especially Mao Yang. He was the clan leader. This matter was like a slap to the face of the entire clan. It had completely humiliated him. Naturally, he had a deep enmity towards Chu Luiyue in his heart. However, he had always been good at disguising himself. Even if he wanted to kill someone, he rarely showed his ferocity. Often, he would take someone's life while chatting. Now, he was treating Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu the same way. After ordering his subordinates to send them off, the Thousand Peak Conference continued. However, the thoughts of many people present had already drifted away. There were 2 extra people on the Divine Dragon Island for no reason. How could they not be concerned? Moreover, although the Thousand Peak Conference was held in a grand manner, there was really nothing shocking about it. It was difficult for everyone to concentrate again. Even Mao Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table, felt a little bored as he looked at the juniors who came up to test their talents and strength. In fact, they roughly knew how strong these people were. The Thousand Peak Conference's test was just a chance for them to compete with each other openly. Mao Yang half leaned on the chair. He could not help but recall the scene that had just happened. Clan leader, clan leader. After an unknown period of time, an elder's voice brought Mao Yang back to his senses. The test is basically over. Do you think it's time to prepare to open the Great Void Temple? Mao Yang's hand knocked on the armrest of the chair. His gaze swept across the people below. The juniors who were participating in the test were now divided into 2 sides. However, their expressions were poles apart at this moment. On one side, they were full of energy. Most of their faces were filled with excitement and joy. These were the ones who were more outstanding and had met the requirements to enter the Great Void Temple. On the other side, those who looked gloomy and stood with their hands by their sides were obviously those who had been eliminated. Looking at the faces of these juniors, Mao Yang's mood suddenly became a little gloomy. He thought of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix who had transformed into a human form at a young age. Among the people in front of him, even the most outstanding 1 or 2 had only transformed into a human form after they had reached adulthood. Compared to that crimson gold heavenly phoenix, the difference was truly too great. Originally, Mao Yang was quite satisfied with them, but when he thought about how the crimson gold sky phoenix clan actually produced such a peerless genius, he suddenly felt unhappy. Comparisons were odious. This sentence couldn't be more appropriate for the 2 ancient divine beast clans. With such a genius appearing, the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix clan side actually did not have the slightest bit of news before. This was truly doing great things in silence. However, Mao Yang felt a little better when he recalled that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix was still maintaining its contract with the Shengguanyu. This kind of thing was extremely taboo for them. It was definitely a huge stain on their reputation. If Shengguanyu is dead, then the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Mao Yang's eyelids drooped slightly, concealing the emotions in his eyes. When he looked up again, his eyes had already regained their usual calmness. He nodded. Yes, we can start preparing now. On the other side, Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue were escorted to Seven Lotus Mountain. Divine Dragon Island was really an isolated island, but it was very large. The island was covered in lush mountains. This Seven Lotus Mountain was one of them. Among the many beautiful and steep mountain peaks, the Seven Lotus Mountain looked ordinary and unremarkable. There was nothing eye-catching about it. However, as soon as they approached, Chu Luiyue sensed that the barrier around Seven Lotus Mountain seemed to be stronger than the barriers around the other mountains. Seven Lotus Mountain is very quiet. I'll have to trouble the two of you to rest here for a period of time. The two great phoenix dragons in charge of escorting them opened the barrier with cold faces and gestured for them to enter. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. He followed the good advice and held Chu Luiyue's hand, bringing her in. As soon as the two of them entered, the barrier behind them was sealed again. The clan leader said that the two of you can just tell us when you've thought it through. We'll be waiting here at any time. It was obvious that they were going to be imprisoned. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly. He did not pay much attention to them and brought Chu Luiyue to the mountainside. Over there was a cave. Almost no one had come to Divine Dragon Island. Other than the Great Void Temple, there were very few houses. Most of the great phoenix dragons preferred to live in caves, and this place was no exception. Chu Luiyue looked around and her eyes finally stopped at the entrance of the cave. The entrance of the cave wasn't particularly big, but from here, it was pitch black inside. It made one's heart turn cold for some reason. Chu Luiyue said. It seems that no one has come to this cave for a long time. There were weeds everywhere, and there was a desolate aura everywhere. Rong Xiu smiled faintly. It's not just this cave. No one has set foot in the entire Seven Lotus Mountain for a long time. Chu Luiyue nodded. She had already noticed earlier that the entire Seven Lotus Peak was deserted, without the slightest sign of life. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. It seemed that other than the two of them, there was no other life here. Strange, she glanced behind her. This place is not far from the Great Void Temple. Why is it so desolate? From here, she could even see the majestic and solemn Great Void Temple standing at the peak of the mountain. Mao Yang and the others were holding the Thousand Summit in the square in front of the Great Void Temple. Rong Xiu smiled and led her in. It's good that it's quiet. Otherwise, people will come and disturb us. As soon as he finished speaking, his sleeves fluttered. A ball of golden flame flew out and burned in front of the cave entrance. Crackle. The surrounding weeds were quickly burned to ashes. Chu Luiyue saw a wisp of greenish-black smoke floating out of the flame. She frowned. That's something dirty, but it's nothing to worry about. Rong Xiu chuckled and retracted the flame. Chu Luiyue clearly felt that the cave entrance seemed to be different from before. She walked a little closer. This feeling became more and more intense. Rong Xiu took a step forward and walked into the cave. The two of them interlocked their fingers. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips and followed him. Just as she walked in, Chu Luiyue looked around and suddenly saw something. She stopped in her tracks and her pupils constricted. On the mountain wall, there were deep marks. It looked like it was slashed by something sharp, but Chu Luiyue could not figure out what kind of sharp weapon could leave such marks. Until she saw a pool of blood at the side. It was dark red and dried. It had completely seeped into the mountain wall. In an instant, a white light flashed in her heart. It said that an ancestor of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe once went mad during cultivation. He killed 7 of his tribe members in one night. After that, he was imprisoned. After 100 days of torture, he was finally killed and died. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. It seems that this 7 Lotus Peak was the cage that imprisoned him. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1741. Chu Luiyue was taken aback. Something like this happened in the Great Phoenix Dragon clan? Why haven't I heard of it before? Previously, when she was looking up information related to the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, she had also looked up a lot of information about the Great Phoenix Dragons and had some understanding of them. However, she had never heard of this before. Rong Xiu smiled and glanced at her. Why would they be willing to let outsiders know about such a scandal? After the incident back then, the Great Phoenix Dragons had spent a lot of effort to seal the news. Chu Luiyue nodded in understanding. That's true. Killing 7 of their own in one night. This kind of thing was definitely a big deal in any clan or sect, let alone the Great Phoenix Dragon clan, which had always been high and mighty. Chu Luiyue paused and did not ask why Rong Xiu knew about this. He even had a way to know about the earth-shattering battle in the Divine Ruins world, let alone this. Rong Xiu was very resourceful and well-informed. She had already seen this before and was not surprised by it now. She raised her head again and carefully looked at the marks on the mountain wall. The mountain rocks on Divine Dragon Island were different from the rocks in the outside world. They were much harder. To be able to leave these marks on the mountain wall, one could see what kind of power was used back then. These marks were messy, but it was not difficult to see how crazy and miserable the person who was trapped here back then was. Looking at the pool of dark red blood again, Chu Luiyue was even a little shocked. These are things that happened many years ago. Don't worry about it. Rong Xiu's slightly rough fingers gently rubbed against her hand, and he comforted her gently and powerfully. Chu Luiyue nodded. I just feel a little puzzled. Logically speaking, this place should be the forbidden area of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Why did they directly put us here? If they wanted to imprison them, which place on Divine Dragon Island would not be more suitable than this place? No wonder this place was so cold and desolate. The people of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would not want to step into this place unless it was a special situation. Rong Xiu looked at the marks on the mountain wall. A sharp glint flashed in the corner of his eyes. He chuckled. They naturally have their reasons. Then, he took out a pearl. The bright light instantly illuminated the 2 of them. Chu Luiyue looked inside. The path in the cave was winding and led all the way to the inside. Therefore, standing here, it was pitch black and nothing could be seen. With the illumination of this pearl, it was naturally much better. Rong Xiu looked at her sideways and asked with a smile, "Do you want to go in and take a look?" Chu Luiyue knew very well that the deeper one went, the more dangerous it would be. However, she still nodded without hesitation. Look. Mao Yang clearly had other motives for locking the 2 of them up here. Instead of waiting passively, it was better to take the initiative to attack. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly. The 2 of them continued to walk inside. In front of the Great Void Temple. The last person had finally finished his test. Mao Yang sighed in his heart. In the end, there was no one who was particularly outstanding. Now, he could only hope that they would have some good fortune after entering the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang stood up with his usual gentle smile on his face. Even the elder who was sitting closest to him did not notice his thoughts. Everyone followed suit and stood up. Mao Yang looked at the batch of winners and said, "Now, everyone's test is over. The fact that you can stand here proves that you are all favored by the heavens." When he spoke, he was full of energy and had an encouraging smile on his face. It was easy to make these young children happy and excited. However, this is only the beginning. The next trial is the true test you will face at the Thousand Summit this time. Mao Yang paused, and his voice became more dignified. The Great Void Temple will open soon. You all enter in order. Inside the temple, there are the inheritances and treasures of your ancestors. Whether you can obtain the opportunity and improve further depends on this. The square was silent. However, in the eyes of the younger generation, there was unconcealable excitement and impulsiveness. They were well aware of how important this match was to them. If they could really obtain the favor of an ancestor, their future would be limitless. Mao Yang looked around and nodded in satisfaction. You should all know that the people in the clan basically only have this one chance. Once you miss this chance, you won't be able to do it again in the future. So, seize this opportunity, understand? Yes. Many young boys and girls responded, unable to hide their excitement. Mao Yang raised his hand and waved it suddenly, Great Void Temple, open. Rumble. A loud rumble came from the Great Void Temple behind him. All the elders exerted their strength together. Several streams of light danced and intertwined. They surrounded the entire Great Void Temple. Immediately after, a dragon's roar seemed to come from a distant time and space, resounding through the heavens and earth. Creak, the door of the Great Void Temple finally opened slowly. Let's go. The younger generation who could no longer hold back immediately moved and flashed into the Great Void Temple. Their silhouettes quickly disappeared behind the door. At the same time, Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu, who were exploring the cave of Seven Lotus Peak, also heard the shocking dragon's roar. Both of them stopped at almost the same time. Chu Luyue could not help but turn back to take a look. At this time, they had already walked into the depths of the cave. Even if they turned back, they could not see anything. But that dragon's roar was too shocking, causing their blood to boil. Clearly, there was such a distance between them. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. The owner of the dragon's roar was definitely more powerful than Mao Yang. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon Clan was an ancient divine beast born in the chaos, and was on par with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix Clan. No matter what, they could not be ignored. The dragon's roar gradually dissipated, but Chu Luyue could still feel it lingering in her ears and could not be dismissed. Suddenly, a slight fluctuation came from her body. Chu Luyue was stunned. Zichen. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1742. Speaking of which, Zichen had been silent for a long time. Even when they encountered such a big change in the god-slaying mound, Zichen did not react. He had always been a man of few words and would not come out unless it was a critical moment. Chu Luyue had long been used to it. She just did not expect that he would actually make a move at this time. I'm fine. Sensing her surprise, Zichen replied. His voice was as low and hoarse as ever. However, it was not the first day that Chu Luyue had met him, and now that they had a contract between them, Zichen's thoughts could not be hidden from Chu Luyue. Is it because of the dragon's roar? Chu Luyue asked tentatively. Zichen was silent for a moment before he said, yes. This answer was simple and direct, but it made Chu Luyue frown. She pondered for a moment, then suddenly remembered something. Those 2 wing bones. There were 2 wing bones of the great phoenix dragon in Zichen's body. Could it be because of this, so, the dragon's roar came from the first ancestor of the great phoenix dragon? That's why it has such a powerful summoning power. Zichen explained. Chu Luyue's expression became a little strange. In fact, when Zichen spoke, she had already guessed the reason for the whole thing. There were 2 bones in Zichen's body, and he had fused with the purest power of the entire skeleton. Hearing the call of the ancestor, the bloodline power of the great phoenix dragon buried in Zichen's body fluctuated. It was very simple and easy to figure out. But the point was, what was this? Zichen was the legendary 3-eyed eagle. If he was really related to the ancient divine beast, it should be the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. He had nothing to do with the great phoenix dragon, but now, because he had fused with the bloodline power, he could sense the call of the great phoenix dragon's ancestor. This was simply, Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes when he noticed that something was wrong with Chu Luyue's expression. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. After thinking about it, she decided to tell Rong Xiu about it. Although it sounded strange, they were in someone else's territory, so they had to be extra careful. Rong Xiu was stunned when he heard that. Immediately after, a faint light seemed to flash through those deep phoenix eyes. At this time, Chu Luiyue was having an incessant headache. He was massaging his temples and did not notice the subtle changes in his expression. It's just 2 skeletons and a strand of bloodline power. I don't think it'll affect them too much. Rong Xiu smiled and comforted. In this world, there are many divine beasts with similar bloodline powers. But in the end, this is different. Chu Luiyue nodded. What she was most worried about was whether things would develop in an unexpected direction. The 2 wing bones and the bloodline power that had fused with Zi Chen's body were like buried landmines. Chu Luiyue was afraid that they would explode. Of course, this was only her own conjecture. Just as Rong Xiu said, Zi Chen had only fused with these powers, but he was still a legendary 3-eyed eagle after all. It shouldn't affect him too much. Chu Luiyue thought silently. Zi Chen, are you sure you're okay? Chu Luiyue was still worried and asked again. Zi Chen responded. Chu Luiyue gradually let down her guard. She had spent a lot of effort to help Zi Chen reconstruct his physical body. She didn't want Zi Chen to be implicated because of the 2 wing bones. After confirming that Zi Chen was fine, Chu Luiyue put away her thoughts and continued to move deeper into the cave with Rong Xiu. The depth of this cave was far beyond Chu Luiyue's initial estimation. She had thought that this was just an ordinary cave with some twists and turns. But as they walked, she realized that she was too naive. This cave was really deep. No, perhaps it should be said that it was really winding. Walking in this cave, the path was either wide or narrow. Every time they walked a certain distance, there would be a turn. After a long time, it was easy to get lost, and it was even difficult to distinguish the direction. Chu Luiyue didn't have such a problem. She had always been excellent in this aspect. Such a terrain didn't pose a problem for her at all. Thus, she quickly realized that they seemed to be just going around in circles in this area. Chu Luiyue looked around in the light of the pearl. They were already very far from the entrance of the cave, but there seemed to be more claw marks on the mountain walls. In fact, along the way, they had seen these marks on the surrounding mountain walls. From time to time, there were also some dried and ancient bloodstains. Chu Luiyue's expression was calm, but her heart was filled with horror. The great phoenix dragon that had been imprisoned here back then must have gone through excruciating torture before it died. Even today, many years later, this hatred and madness, even hysteria, was still shocking to the core. Chu Luiyue's heart unconsciously became heavy. During this process, within her dantian, Zi Chen's body no longer emitted the same fluctuations as before. The 2 of them walked in silence. After about an hour, they stopped together. We were here just now. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and said softly. Rong Xiu nodded. It seems that person back then was trapped here and couldn't get out. Chu Luiyue looked around. They had been walking here for a long time, but they always seemed to be circling. This is actually an illusion, she muttered softly. When they came in, she didn't notice at all. This illusion was so realistic that it was almost impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. The secluded path was deep and silent. They seemed to be unable to get out. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1743. Outside the Great Void Temple, Mao Yang and the elders of the clan were waiting quietly. Their gazes were fixed on the towering Great Void Temple. The bright sunlight fell on the roof, reflecting a noble and gorgeous light. It was majestic, solemn, and sacred. I wonder if there will be a few lucky ones this time. Mao Shen is the most outstanding one among the younger generation, right? I can't say for the others, but Mao Shen will definitely succeed. Hey, how can you be sure about something like a lucky chance? There used to be people who didn't have the best talents, but they got extremely powerful inheritances, right? I think before they come out, it's hard to say what will happen. Everyone discussed in a low voice. The elder next to him looked at Mao Yang and asked with a smile, "Leader, do you think there's anyone you like?" Mao Yang smiled faintly. They're right. No one can tell what will happen until the last moment. At this time, his attitude was always more conservative. Everyone was used to it and didn't think much of it. Mao Yang looked for a while and suddenly asked, "By the way, have those people outside the Divine Dragon Island left?" The elder hurriedly said, "Just now, the people below reported back that they have already left. You were opening the Taishu temple at that time, so we didn't have time to tell you." Mao Yang frowned slightly. That crimson gold heavenly phoenix also left? The elder nodded affirmatively. They saw those people leave with their own eyes. Also, I've just asked them to strengthen the patrols and guard. No one is allowed to come close to the Divine Dragon Island. Don't worry. Mao Yang nodded, but he was a little suspicious. That crimson gold heavenly phoenix was Shengguan Yu's contracted divine beast. How could it just leave like that? According to what Rongxiu said, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix should have chased after them from the god-slaying tomb. It must have been tough for them to travel thousands of miles. They were sent away just because of this? He paused and said, "Send more people. Send more people to keep a close eye on them. We can't afford to make any mistakes before the Thousand Peak Conference ends." Yes. Mao Yang's lips moved. He wanted to send someone to investigate the background of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix and find out what happened during the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix ancestral worship ceremony. But on second thought, he suppressed these thoughts. Now was the most important time for the Thousand Summit, so it was not appropriate for him to take care of these matters. Besides, it was obvious that Yi Zhao had his own plans for keeping the news a secret. If he didn't want anyone to know, no one would be able to find out. At a time like this, there was no need to confront Yi Zhao and the others head-on. At this moment, he caught a glimpse of a figure walking over quickly from the corner of his eyes. He was one of the guards who escorted Rongxiu and Shengguan Yu. "Greetings, Patriarch." That person walked straight to Mao Yang and bowed respectfully. Mao Yang nodded. "Rise. What about the two of them? Are there any abnormal reactions?" The guard lowered his head and said, "Not at all." Mao Yang's expression changed slightly. "Really?" The guard nodded. "After arriving at 7 Lotus Peak, we opened the barrier, and the two of them went straight in without saying anything. It seems normal." Mao Yang was silent for a moment. 7 Lotus Peak was an extremely special place on Divine Dragon Island. The two of them would definitely sense that something was wrong. But why was there no reaction at all? Countless thoughts flashed through Mao Yang's mind, but his face was calm and gentle as usual. "Then let's continue to watch. If there's anything wrong, report it immediately." "Yes." A day passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone in front of the Temple of Void was still waiting quietly. Suddenly, a wave came from the Temple of Void. Everyone focused their attention on the screen. Then, they saw the door open, and a figure flew out from it. Bang! That person fell heavily to the ground, and there was a trace of pain on his face. Then, the door closed. The whole process was smooth and clean. Many people were disappointed. A white-robed elder standing in front of the main hall looked at the youth lying on the ground and said in a deep voice, "Mao Shang, eliminated." Hearing this, the youth's face showed a trace of unwillingness and shame. He was the first one to be eliminated. Countless gazes fell on him, making him feel as if there were daggers at his back. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain, stood up, bowed in the direction of the Temple of Void, and then left with a gloomy expression. Everyone in the tribe only had one chance in their life to enter the Temple of Void to search for the inheritance. This time, he did not get anything, and in the future, his originally burning hope was suddenly splashed with a bucket of cold water, and no one would feel good about it. Moreover, he was still young and hot-blooded. The square was very quiet. Some people glanced at the youth, and then looked away expressionlessly. This was all too common for them. Generally speaking, this last stage would take the longest time. In this process, those who did not get the inheritance and opportunity would be kicked out one after another. This was just the beginning, and it would take about a month until the end of the journey. Only a day had passed, and there was still a long wait. Mao Yang's expression was gentle. Go back and cultivate well, and you may have a chance to stand out in the future. The youth's expression became better, and he bowed to Mao Yang gratefully. Although the tribe leader was of noble status, he was always very kind to them, even those who were not good enough. He never looked down on them. This made many people in the tribe respect him even more. Of course, there were a few elders who objected, saying that the great phoenix dragon tribe was an ancient divine beast, and their status should be determined by the power of their bloodline and their true strength. However, Mao Yang was the tribe leader after all, and they did not dare to go overboard. After a few persuasions, seeing that Mao Yang was still the same, they did not mention it again. Mao Yang looked in the direction of 7 Lotus Peak. A day had passed, and there was still no movement from the two of them. I wonder how the situation is now. How can they be so calm after being locked up in that place? Mao Yang frowned, but soon returned to normal. He looked away, and once again focused on the Temple of Void. Anyway, there would be a day when they could not hold on. 7 Lotus Peak. Inside the cave, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu sat face to face on the ground. Between the two of them, there was a chessboard outlined with bright lines. On the chessboard, the two of them fought fiercely. After these two people realized that this was an illusion, they didn't want to go out, and directly started playing chess here. Chu Luiyue rested her chin on one hand, and her slender fingers gently tapped on her chin, her eyes fixed on the chessboard. After a moment, her eyes lit up, and she placed another piece. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1744. The two of them were playing chess happily and leisurely. When a person was immersed in something, time always passed very quickly. During this period, Chu Luiyue had been rushing between Phoenix Mountain and the God-slaying tomb. She was very busy. The two of them had almost no time alone. It was even difficult for them to have a proper conversation. Now, they finally had time to sit down and rest. They could even play chess and talk together. Most importantly, no one would disturb them, so they didn't have to worry about life and death. Chu Luiyue felt very relaxed. The Holy Sun was very satisfied. I won. Chu Luiyue's eyes were bright, full of unconcealable joy. Rong Xiu also smiled, with a sense of laziness. You seem to have improved a lot. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. Of course. Rong Xiu smiled and shook his head. I mean, after you came out of the God-slaying tomb, you seem to have improved a lot. When she played chess, her moves were obviously different from before. It seemed that she could see more clearly. Chu Luiyue was stunned, and then she began to think seriously. It seems a little. At first, she didn't feel it, but when Rong Xiu said this, she realized that when she played chess with Rong Xiu this time, her thoughts seemed to be clearer and her reactions were faster. It was as if somehow, she naturally knew where to go. Suddenly, Chu Luiyue was stunned. Was it because she had seen tens of thousands of music scores in the God-slaying tomb? After overcoming one music score after another with great difficulty, she felt much more relaxed when she saw these now. Rong Xiu looked at her with a smile. I lost. Princess, do you have any reward? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and glanced at him. Your Highness, can you be more shameless? It's fine that you won, but now that you've lost, you want a reward? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and readily agreed. Even if there's no reward, there should be some consolation, right? Chu Luyue. No. As she spoke, she gently waved her hand, and the chess pieces on the chessboard all scattered. One more round. She desperately wanted to know if her guess was right. However, Rong Xiao was not having it. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. I'm too tired to eat anymore. Chu Luyue was speechless. It had only been a while, and he was already saying that he was tired and didn't want to play anymore. Although this method of chess was indeed quite taxing on one's origin power and spirit, it wasn't believable coming from Rong Xiao's mouth. He was obviously trying to comfort her. After a while, she smiled as well. I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few years, your highness' stamina would actually decline so much. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luyue felt the surrounding temperature suddenly drop. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows, then suddenly stood up and walked over. As he took a step forward, the chessboard between the two of them dispersed like water ripples, transforming into several streams of light that flew away. The distance between the two of them was extremely close to begin with. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue was sitting, while he was standing, but there was a strong sense of oppression. Then, he bent down. His handsome and devilish face suddenly came close, and his warm breath fell on her face. Chu Luyue's heart suddenly tightened. At this moment, she keenly sensed a trace of danger. Rong Xiao was very close to her. When they spoke, their breaths were intertwined. He seemed to be laughing, and his voice was exceptionally deep and provocative. He reached out his hand and pinched her chin, not allowing her to escape. His slightly rough fingers gently caressed her dark red and tender lips. His breathing suddenly became heavier. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. He leaned closer, slightly tilted his head, and pressed his lips against her white and somewhat transparent ear. In a low voice, he said word by word, "You haven't tried, how would you know?" Half of Chu Luyue's body went numb. Rong Xiao looked with satisfaction at her white and delicate ear, which was quickly dyed with a layer of crimson. This crimson-red color quickly spread to her slender neck. Her hair was like a waterfall, and her fine black hair hung down, making her skin look even more delicate. With this touch of red, it was more like a fire was lit in Rong Xiao's heart. He suddenly bit her delicate earlobe. Chu Luyue was startled, subconsciously shrinking her neck, and a soft sound came out of her throat. Sweet and soft. So sweet that his whole body heated up. His syllables were vague, but every word was beating on her heart. Since you won't give it to me, I will take it myself. Outside the boundary of 7 Lotus Peaks, security was tight. One of the guards couldn't help but look back. Silence, desolation. The cave halfway up the mountain, except for the first day when Rong Xiao burned it with fire, there was no other movement. It's been a few days, why haven't they shown any reaction? The patriarch had already specifically asked about it twice. The other guard also looked back and frowned. That's right. This is not an ordinary place, it's 7 Lotus Peaks. Even the clansmen who were locked up here could only last 3 days at most, let alone 2 humans. Ever since Rong Xiao and Sheng Guanyu were locked up here, they had been tense and didn't dare to slack off, waiting for them to come out at any time to bow their heads and admit defeat. According to past experience, it wouldn't take too long. But who would have thought that after a few days, everything was still the same as before? It can't be. Could it be that the two of them have already fainted inside? So, impossible. If that's the case, they would have been directly sent out, and not like now. There's no sound at all. Both of them fell silent. For now, it seemed that they could only continue to wait. It seems like half of the Temple of Void have been eliminated. One of the guards changed the topic. The other didn't think much of it. Isn't that normal? There are only a few who are really powerful. For those people, the 1,000 Summit is a good opportunity for a meteoric rise, but for the majority of the people, it's just a side run. The competition in the clan was fierce, and this was normal. That's true. The other guard responded and didn't say anything else. Outside Divine Dragon Island. On a barren mountain peak, Dumpling looked at Nan Suhui, blinking her eyes, unable to hide her excitement. Grandpa Dean, will this method really work? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1745. Nan Suhui shook his head. Actually, I can't guarantee that it will succeed. Hearing this, Dumpling's grape-like big eyes flashed with disappointment. However, she quickly became spirited again. She clenched her small fists and said seriously, "Even if there's a glimmer of hope, I still want to try." Nan Suhui stroked her hair. "Okay." After saying that, Nan Suhui turned to look at Shengguan Jing. "Senior Shengguan, please protect me." Shengguan Jing nodded. In fact, he was also very curious about what method Nan Suhui had to break through the heavy defenses of Divine Dragon Island and contact you, and the others. Shengguan Jing raised his hand, and a palm-sized green iron ring appeared in his palm. This iron ring looked quite old, and there were spots of rust on its edges. One could vaguely see some kind of complicated pattern engraved on it, and it emitted an ancient aura. "This is a divine artifact that I made in my early years. It can conceal one's aura and form an extremely powerful barrier. It should be the most suitable for protecting you." As he spoke, he held his breath and concentrated, injecting a strand of force into it. Buzz! Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from the cyan iron hoop. Small fragments of light shone out from the patterns. Shengguan Jing threw his wrist. The green iron ring instantly flew above everyone's heads. It spun rapidly, and a clear and bright white light sprinkled down like a thin veil, forming a hemispherical barrier that enveloped everyone. Nan Suhui calmed down a little. He crossed his legs and raised his arms. Several streams of light flew out from his fingertips and quickly intersected in midair, forming a circular xian formation. The surrounding space seemed to be affected by this power, and it produced subtle fluctuations. Vaguely, he could even see the fine black spatial rifts in them. The others were all taken aback. This was not a xian formation, but a teleportation formation. Although these two formations were usually used by xian masters, there was a huge difference between them. Building a teleportation formation was several times more difficult than drawing a xian formation. Not only did xian masters need to have sufficient understanding of xian formations, they also needed to have sufficient control over space. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause extremely serious consequences. Of course, the people present were not surprised by Nan Suhui's construction of the teleportation formation. After all, he was a well-deserved top expert. It was not a difficult task for him. Most importantly, why did he choose to take action at this time? After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the teleportation array was finally completed. Dumpling stared blankly at the flickering teleportation array. "Grandpa Dean, didn't you say that you wanted to find a way to contact you and the others? Then this teleportation array is..." Nan Suhui patiently explained. The purpose of creating the teleportation formation is naturally to enter the Divine Dragon Island. Shengguan Jing and Chu Ning both looked at Nan Suhui in unison. They couldn't hide the shock on their faces. So this was his plan. Even Tuanzi felt that something was wrong. She tilted her head and asked curiously, But didn't that person say that he wouldn't let us in? Moreover, they are heavily guarded. From what I can see, there are 2 layers of barriers. This teleportation circle. How do I get in?" She had thought that Grandpa Dean meant to wait outside for Yu and the rest to come out. Nan Suhui chuckled. "Won't we be able to contact them if we use this teleportation array? We might even be able to see them directly." That was even better. Chu Ning couldn't help but frown. She asked with a worried expression. "Dean Nan, can your teleportation array really avoid the Great Phoenix Dragon's search and directly find you, and the rest?" Nan Suhui laughed. "Of course. He heaved a long sigh and looked at the teleportation array solemnly. This teleportation array was created by the first dean of our Lingxiao College. It said that if one can fully comprehend it, even the barriers of the world of divine ruins won't be able to stop them from coming and going. However, only the dean is qualified to learn this teleportation array. I've studied it for several years, but I've only reached the initial level. Although I can't enter and exit the world of divine ruins as I wish, it shouldn't be a problem for me to sneak into the Divine Dragon Island. Sheng Guanjing and Chu Ning exchanged a look and saw the shock in each other's eyes. It could ignore the barriers and move freely inside and outside the world of divine ruins. This teleportation array was really powerful. Sheng Guanjing sighed. It said that the first dean of your college was a peerless powerhouse and had the ability to reach the heavens. Now it seems that he really lives up to his reputation. Nan Su Hui smiled. There was no doubt about that. There had always been many rumors about that person in the world of divine ruins. However, the true ability of that person back then was more than several times stronger than those rumors. However, this was basically only known to the past deans of the college. There's just one thing. Nan Su Hui's expression suddenly became serious. Once this teleportation array is activated, I need to guard it throughout the entire process, just in case. In other words, I have to stay here. In addition, I'll have to trouble Senior Shengguan to help protect me. Therefore, only Chu Ning and Dumpling could go in. They were all stunned. Chu Ning thought for a moment and shook her head. I'm now a stage 1 warrior. If I follow them in, not only will I not be of any help, I might even drag them down. It's better for me to stay here. He was very clear about his own strength. Although he had the indestructible divine body that ordinary people couldn't have, his resistance to attacks was top-notch, and he could also use the divine domain. But this time, they wanted to secretly enter Divine Dragon Island to find someone. He wouldn't be of any help, so it was better for him to stay. Tuanzi was lighter and more agile when she was alone. Moreover, she had a contract with you, so she was the best person to find someone. Nan Su Hui nodded. In fact, he also thought so in his heart. However, in this case, only Dumpling could go in alone. He was more or less worried. Dumpling, can you do it by yourself? Dumpling was also a little surprised. She originally thought that everyone could go in together. Hearing Nan Su Hui's question, she opened her eyes wide and looked back and forth between them a few times. Finally, she nodded vigorously. Yes. Nan Su Hui looked relieved, but he couldn't help but smile bitterly. If Patriarch Yi Zhao and the others know about this, I don't know how to explain it. Dumpling's identity was too special. If she was just an ordinary divine beast, it would be fine. However, she was the great phoenix dragon's enemy, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. More importantly, she was the young master. If this was discovered by the great phoenix dragon and the others, it would definitely set off a perilous situation. Dumpling knew what he was worried about. She pursed her lips and said seriously. Grandpa Dean, don't worry. After I go in, I will be very careful. Once I find Ayu, I will bring them back. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1746. After saying that, Tuanzi lightly jumped onto the teleportation array. Nan Suhui nodded lightly. Be careful. With that, force surged in his palm. In an instant, light shone brightly. The transportation formation slowly rotated. Soon, Dumpling's figure was swallowed by the light and completely disappeared. On the square in front of the Great Void Temple, everyone was still waiting. A few days had passed, and most of the people who entered had been eliminated. Only the last 5 people were left in the group. Mao Yang's expression was calm, and he did not say a word. The surrounding atmosphere was inexplicably stagnant. It was silent. Everyone was silent, as if they were afraid of disturbing something. Actually, there was a reason why they were like this. None of the people who had been eliminated had obtained any inheritance in the Great Void Temple. This was something that had never happened in the previous Thousand Peak Summit. Although most of the people who had been eliminated early on had obtained nothing, there were occasionally some lucky people who had encountered their own opportunities. Even if the inheritance they obtained was not the best, it was still a good thing. But this time, the people who had gone before had all returned empty-handed. Therefore, although Mao Yang's expression did not change, and he was still as calm as ever, everyone could not help but feel nervous. Given the current situation, unless the 5 people at the back all obtained good inheritances, or at least one of them obtained a top inheritance, the uneasiness in everyone's hearts could be appeased. Some people secretly glanced at Mao Yang from time to time, wanting to see something from his expression. Unfortunately, Mao Yang's thoughts were always hidden deep, and no one could guess them. Suddenly, Mao Yang's brows twitched, and he glanced back. This extremely simple action immediately made many people around him nervous. "Patriarch, what's wrong?" An elder bowed and asked. Mao Yang stared at the void in the distance for a long time before saying, "During this period, has there been anything strange outside the Divine Dragon Island?" Just now, he vaguely sensed that there seemed to be a slight fluctuation in the boundary outside. However, this fluctuation disappeared in an instant, as if it was just his imagination. The elder was stunned, and then hurriedly said, "Patriarch, everything is normal. Ever since you ordered us to strictly guard the boundary, the clan has sent more people to guard it, and we won't let anyone in as they wish." Mao Yang nodded. Even if he didn't say anything, the elders in the clan would be especially vigilant in this regard. However, what was that wave of energy just now? Could it be that he was mistaken? Mao Yang thought for a moment and stood up. "I'll go take a look myself." Everyone around was shocked. The 1000 Summit is still ongoing. How could the Patriarch leave at this time? What they didn't know was that Mao Yang's patience was actually almost worn down. He had been the Patriarch for many years and had experienced the Millennium Summit many times. He was very experienced in this aspect. He knew that even if the remaining 5 people obtained the inheritance, it would be very difficult for them to be compared with the little girl from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. It was just that he could not say these words in public. Mao Yang lifted his leg and walked over. The people behind him looked at each other. He was the Patriarch, so who would dare to stop him? Moreover, he was going to check the defenses of the Divine Dragon Island. There was absolutely no reason to dissuade him from doing so. A few elders exchanged glances, and one of them followed. Anyway, it was just a look, so it wouldn't waste much time and energy. Bang! The door of the Great Void Temple suddenly opened again. A figure flew out from within. Unlike those who were thrown out in a sorry state, this young man was very calm when he came out. He took a step, his body spun in midair, and landed steadily on the ground. There were a few bloodstains on his body, but it didn't affect the powerful aura surging around him. More importantly, the great phoenix dragon totem between his eyebrows was shining faintly. This was the sign of obtaining the inheritance. And from that reaction, it seemed to be a very good inheritance. The square, which had been silent for a long time, finally became lively again because of the appearance of this young man. Mao Yang smiled when he saw this scene. After hesitating for a moment, he dismissed the idea of personally checking the barrier. This was the first junior to obtain the inheritance. As the Patriarch, how could he not be here? Go take a look again. You must guard every corner of the Divine Dragon Island well, he said in a low voice. The elders beside him hurriedly responded. Yes. Mao Yang nodded and walked towards the young man. At this moment, a satisfied and appreciative smile appeared on his face. Well done. The young man also couldn't hide his excitement. The inheritance he obtained this time was indeed of a high level. Even if it wasn't the best, it was still very good. Thank you, Patriarch. Mao Yang nodded and asked a few more questions. The young man respectfully answered them one by one. Mao Yang returned to his seat and began to wait for the remaining 4 to come out. And that small ripple was quickly put aside by him. 7 Lotus Peak. Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue were still playing chess. Of course, this was already a new round. On the chessboard, the two of them fought fiercely, and Chu Luyue had a slight advantage. She stared at the chessboard and didn't move for a long time. Rong Xiao wasn't in a hurry and just waited quietly. Finally, Chu Luyue put down her hand and shook her head. "I'm not playing anymore." After repeated investigations, she could now confirm that her strength in this aspect was indeed much stronger than before. In the past, when she played chess with Rong Xiao, she always lost more than she won. Moreover, she had to expend a lot of mental strength every time. But now, this feeling had lessened a lot. After reading the tens of thousands of fake zither scores, her talent as a mystic master had increased by an astonishing amount. One had to know that talent was something that came with being born and was basically unchangeable. Martial artists might be able to use some special methods to increase the grade of their yuan meridians, but mystic masters and celestial physician really couldn't do anything. But now, she was certain that her talent in this aspect had changed. Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and the corners of his eyes seemed to contain a hint of flirtatiousness. He said lazily and straightforwardly, "Comfort. Digression, the list of New Year's Day activities and the list of events from last month will be released tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read." Chapter 1747. Chu Luyue glared at him angrily. Her starry eyes were bright and her face was flushed red, which made her eyes look even brighter. This look was not threatening at all. Instead, it was like a gentle scratch on Rong Xiao's heart. Soft, sweet, and a little ticklish. He wanted to pull her over, just like last time. Thinking of this, Rong Xiao restrained himself and calmed down. He couldn't think about it anymore. In front of her, he never had any willpower to speak of. Previously, when he pressed her down and wanted to comfort her, he really bullied her. After that, Yu didn't even let him touch her hand. He coaxed her for a few days. Rong Xiao couldn't help but chuckle and rub his eyebrows. Forget it. Anyway, the one who suffers in the end is I. Chu Luyue's face was slightly hot, and the corners of her lips curled up. You reap what you sow, and you ask for trouble. It's referring to people like your highness. Rong Xiao raised a finger and shook it, looking at her with a smile. I don't feel bitter, you is extremely sweet. Chu Luyue, that's why thick-skinned and black-bellied men are always particularly difficult to deal with. Chu Luyue simply gave up fighting with him. In this aspect, she almost never won. She stood up, thought for a while, and then added, then your highness can continue to suffer like this. In short, there's no comfort or reward. Rong Xiao's smile deepened. There's no hurry. After the wedding, I will naturally ask for it all. Chu Luyue snorted and simply changed the topic. Then we have to get out of here first. She looked around her. Rong Xiao's pearl illuminated the area around the two of them, but it was empty. No matter whether it was in front or behind, it was pitch black. Only the crazy and mournful marks on the surrounding mountain walls, as well as the ancient bloodstains that appeared occasionally, were particularly eye-catching. We've been here for quite a long time. Chu Luyue said and looked at Rong Xiao again. When do you think it's a good time to leave? She directly asked about the time, not whether they could leave. Because after entering, she found that Rong Xiao's reaction was very calm. She was inexplicably certain that Rong Xiao definitely knew how to break out of this illusion. Rong Xiao walked over. If there was anyone in this world who understood him and could guess his thoughts, it was only her. Even if he didn't say anything, just a look was more than 1,000 words. The thousand summit is not over. Chu Luyue was stunned. Rong Xiao was indeed waiting. But why did he wait until the end? End? Just as she was about to continue asking, a familiar wave of energy suddenly came over. She suddenly turned her head. In that deep darkness, a bright light suddenly flashed. This light quickly dispersed into several rays and intertwined with each other. In a moment, a teleportation array was formed. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the teleportation array. Then, a familiar little figure appeared in the glittering light. Dumpling. Chu Liyue widened her eyes in shock. Who else could it be other than Tuanzi? She was wearing a red and golden lotus leaf dress and had 2 round buns on her head. Ah, you. Hearing Chu Liuyue's voice, Dumpling, who was still a little dizzy, immediately looked over. When she saw the face that she missed, Dumpling's cheeks flushed red with excitement. She ran over excitedly. Ah, you. I found you. As she spoke, she threw herself into Chu Liuyue's arms. Chu Liyue bent down and caught her. The two of them hugged each other tightly. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Dumpling hugged Chu Liuyue's neck tightly. Ah, you. I've been looking for you so hard. Ever since she returned to Ah Yu's side, they had never been separated for so long. Hearing her slightly choked voice, Chu Liuyue's heart ached. She patted her back gently. All right. I'm fine now, aren't I? By the way, weren't you stopped outside? How did you get in? Chu Liyue let go of Dumpling and looked her up and down carefully. Have you been discovered? Are you hurt? Dumpling shook her head. No. I was very careful when I came in. They didn't discover me. And I'm not hurt. With Grandpa Dean around, how could I be hurt? Chu Liyue instantly understood. Did Master specially send you here? When she saw the teleportation array, she recognized that it was her master's work. However, she didn't expect that it was Dumpling who came. Where's Taizu and Daddy? Are they outside? Dumpling nodded. Yes. They're all with Grandpa Dean. Following that, she briefly recounted what had happened earlier. So in the end, Grandpa Dean told me to come and find you myself. Originally, Dumpling didn't dare to have too much hope. She was prepared to look for them here. Fortunately, Nan Suhui was very powerful and directly sent her here. After all, Chu Liyue was his disciple. The master and disciple had a certain level of telepathy between them. To be able to find her directly, one had to have strength and luck. Chu Liyue's heart was in her mouth. Dumpling, you really weren't discovered? After all, Dumpling was a crimson gold celestial phoenix. The great phoenix dragon should be extremely sensitive to her aura. After all, this was Divine Dragon Island. The slightest carelessness would cause great trouble. Therefore, Chu Liyue was extremely careful. Those people shouldn't have noticed. Otherwise, they would have rushed over by now. Rong Xiu said. Chu Liyue thought about it and felt that it made sense. For the time being, there was no movement outside. Dumpling held Chu Liyue's hand, her eyes bright. Ah, you, let's go now. As long as they left secretly, no one could do anything to them. Chu Liyue paused, but did not immediately agree. She and Rong Xiu were locked up here by Mao Yang. Mao Yang said that unless they agreed to erase their memories of Divine Dragon Island, he would never let them leave. His attitude was very firm. Even if they left now, the Great Void Phoenix Dragon race would not let this matter rest. Moreover, this matter would only get bigger and bigger. During this period of time, she had been thinking about whether she could solve these problems without shedding blood, but she had no answer. Just as her heart was wavering, Rong Xiu said, "We can't leave yet." Chu Liyue and Dumpling turned to look at him. Tuanzi was at a loss. Why? She had finally found this place. Couldn't they just leave through the teleportation array? Chu Liyue was more and more certain of her guess. She asked directly, "What do you plan to do after the 1000 Summit?" Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. "If we leave quietly, although we can temporarily escape, there will be endless trouble. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan is very vengeful. If we don't completely solve the problem, there will only be endless trouble. It's better to let them owe us a favor and take the initiative to let us leave." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1748. Chu Luiyue knew that the Great Phoenix Dragon clan was not easy to deal with. This could be seen from the Taizu. For that set of bones, they had chased after the Taizu for thousands of years and had refused to give up. If it were not for the incident in the academy, they would still be pestering her. Of course, this hatred did not disappear. Instead, it was transferred to her. When Mao Yao looked at her, his eyes were full of resentment. She saw it clearly. Even the other members of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan were full of hostility towards her. If possible, she did not want to continue being entangled with them like this. It would be best if she could solve the problem once and for all. Owe them a favor? How? They were now in someone else's territory. It was obviously not very convenient for them to do anything, let alone make the Great Phoenix Dragon clan owe them a favor. Rong Xiu raised his hand and pointed upwards. They have already sent the opportunity to us. There is no reason for us not to take it. Chu Luiyue suddenly thought of something. You mean, their ancestor who went berserk? Rong Xiu nodded and smiled. Although the Great Phoenix Dragon was a sinner in their clan and had a tragic end, he was an extremely top genius when he was alive. The Great Phoenix Dragon clan had even tacitly agreed that he would be the next clan leader. Even Mao Yang could not be compared to him. If those messy things had not happened back then, Mao Yang would not have been the clan leader now. Chu Luiyue was shocked. You mean, that person is of the same generation as Mao Yang? She had always thought that it should be something that happened a long time ago. Mao Yang has been the clan leader for 800 years. That incident happened 1,000 years ago. Rong Xiu said. 1,000 years was not a short time. More importantly, that Great Phoenix Dragon had once obtained an extremely powerful inheritance. Chu Luiyue was slightly taken aback. Inheritance? That's right. All the powerful ancestors of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe would be enshrined in the Great Void Temple after they passed away. These skeletons contained their pure bloodline power, as well as many incantations they had learned when they were alive. If you can obtain its recognition and obtain its power, you will be considered to have obtained its inheritance. Those who can be enshrined in the Great Void Temple and leave behind their legacies are obviously very powerful. However, when they were put together, it was inevitable that there would be a difference in strength. It was said that the Great Void Phoenix Dragon had obtained one of the top 3 inheritances. Rong Xiu paused. In the past 10,000 years, only 2 people have obtained the top 3 successions. It was one of them. Chu Luiyue subconsciously held his breath. From this, it was not difficult to understand how powerful the inheritance was. For the Great Phoenix Dragon to be able to do this, it was clearly extraordinary. How did such a powerful figure end up? Chu Luiyue muttered in a low voice, somewhat puzzled. Rong Xiu smiled. There is often only a step between a genius and a lunatic. So much time has passed, and no one can clearly explain what happened back then. However, the key is that after its death, the inheritance also disappeared. The Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe spent a lot of manpower and material resources to search for it for a long time, but to no avail. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood something, and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Could it be that, you want to find the inheritance? Rong Xiu's smile deepened. Chu Luiyue's heart was in turmoil. This thing was extremely important to the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe. If this was used as a plan, those matters would be easily solved. However, this matter was easy to say, but it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. This, even the Great Void Phoenix Dragon tribe has no clue. How can we find it? Rong Xiu's gaze turned slightly and landed on the mountain wall. A long time had passed, but the traces still showed the madness of back then. He gently raised his hand. In his palm, a pearl the size of a longan suddenly appeared. A small figure of a Great Void Phoenix Dragon appeared in it. Chu Luiyue suddenly opened his eyes wide. This is, when I refined the skeleton previously, I left half of the bloodline power. Rong Xiu said with a smile. As expected. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood, and at the same time secretly exclaimed. She didn't even notice when Rong Xiu was doing all this. Mao Yang and the others probably did not know, otherwise they would not have let them leave so easily. To cross the sky and the sea under the other party's nose, only Rong Xiu could do this. Rong Xiu's fingertips moved slightly, and the small ball of light flew to a dark red bloodstain on the mountain wall, and in the blink of an eye, disappeared. The surroundings were silent. A moment later, Chu Luiyue was shocked to see that the color of the bloodstain suddenly turned bright red. Then, the bloodstain began to rapidly condense, and finally, formed a blood bead, suspended in midair. Qi! A cluster of golden flames rose from Rong Xiu's palm. The flames quickly pounced and enveloped the blood bead, forming a blood-red and golden bead. Rong Xiu walked to the side. The bead followed him and soon landed in front of another remaining dark red bloodstain. As if guided by the power of the blood bead, the bloodstain quickly turned bright red, and then transformed into a blood bead and merged with it. Chu Luiyue said, "Are you going to merge all the bloodstains here?" "No." Rong Xiu shook his head, "Only that one." Chu Luiyue instantly understood something. "You mean, besides this, there are other great void phoenix dragons' blood here?" Mao Yang. Zi Chen's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Luiyue was stunned. "There are only 2 great void phoenix dragons' blood here. Some of it is that one, and the rest is Mao Yang's." Zi Chen also had a part of the great void phoenix dragon's bloodline power in his body, so he was obviously much more sensitive in this regard. Since he said that it was Mao Yang's blood, it must be right. But the point was, why was there only Mao Yang's blood here? Didn't they say that the one who went berserk was imprisoned here for a period of time and was executed? Was Mao Yang also involved in this matter? Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that there seemed to be a shocking secret buried here. And they were only one step away from this secret. Dumpling was in a hurry to take them away, but after hearing what they said, she felt that it made sense and waited obediently by the side. Inside the cave, there was only silence. Only the blood bead in Rong Xiu's hand became more and more bloody as time passed. Following that, there was a powerful pressure that was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue could not help but be secretly shocked. Just a few remaining bloodstains, when gathered together, were already so shocking. Then, how powerful was that person back then? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1749. Rong Xiu spent about 2 hours collecting all the bloodstains in the cave. Of course, these were only the blood of the one who was imprisoned here. As for the rest, he did not pay any attention to them. A fist-sized blood bead floated quietly in front of the 2 of them. An indescribably powerful pressure gradually emanated from it. It was very shocking. The faint glow of the pearl reflected on it, giving it a strange and beautiful dazzling light. Chu Luiyue asked in a low voice. "What should we do next? Could it be that the inheritance was left in this blood bead?" That seemed unlikely. At this moment, a fluctuation came from Chu Luiyue's dantian. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The fluctuation came from Zi Chen. A black light flashed in front of him, and a huge black figure appeared in the cave. Zi Chen? Zi Chen rarely took the initiative to come out, so Chu Luiyue was very surprised. However, Zi Chen stared at the blood bead with a grave expression. "Did you see something?" Chu Luiyue asked. Zi Chen nodded. "This blood bead hides the aura of the great phoenix dragon's ancestor." Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. Rong Xiu also narrowed his eyes. Zi Chen quickly explained. "Of course, this does not mean that this blood bead belongs to that ancestor. It only means that this blood bead should contain the power of that ancestor." Zichen paused for a moment before he said, "If I'm not wrong, this person must have obtained the inheritance of their ancestor." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire cave fell into a dead silence. Chu Luiyue felt that something was wrong when he heard Zichen's first sentence. Now that he heard Zichen's explanation, he was even more shocked. Rongxiu was silent for a moment, then a playful smile appeared on his face. It said that it obtained an extremely powerful and precious inheritance. I only thought that it was some powerful ancestor. I didn't expect it to be their ancestor. Zichen nodded. It had the power of the great phoenix dragon in its body, so it could not be mistaken. This aura was exactly the same as the pressure from the dragon's roar that they heard when they entered. If that's the case, it'll be even more interesting. The corners of Rongxiu's lips curled up slightly, and there seemed to be waves in his deep phoenix eyes. The great void phoenix dragon has received the inheritance of our ancestor. She is the heir chosen by our ancestor. Her bloodline is the purest. How could she have gone mad? Chu Luiyue subconsciously glanced at Dumpling. That's right. These two ancient divine beast clans were very particular about the power of the bloodline, and they were very protective of their ancestors. Take Dumpling for example. Although her background was ordinary, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's attitude towards her immediately changed greatly after she received the approval of the ancestors. From full of disdain to full of respect. However, it was because the ancestors had personally chosen her and acknowledged her. How could someone with such a powerful bloodline and the inheritance of their ancestors do such a crazy thing as killing her own clan? It seems that there is a hidden story behind what happened back then. It has received the inheritance of our ancestors. How could no one know about such an important matter? Rongxiu smiled faintly. It's not necessarily that no one knows. It's just that, the people who know about this matter have buried this secret forever. A light flashed across Chu Luiyue's mind. Mao Yang. It must be him. If that was the case, it was not difficult to explain why there were only 2 bloodstains left in this cave. More importantly, the person who had become the clan leader after the Great Void Phoenix clan was killed was Mao Yang. As the biggest beneficiary of this matter, how could he have nothing to do with it? How could it be clean? The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan, from top to bottom, had probably been completely concealed. But after so many years, how could the people of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan not discover anything fishy at all? This 7 Lotus Mountain, this cave, these bloodstains. Since Zichen could detect these, their clansmen should be able to as well. Rongxiu seemed to have guessed her thoughts and explained. Naturally, it's because everything here has been tampered with. Do you still remember that before we came in, I set fire to the entrance of the cave and set it on fire? Chu Luiyue nodded. There are some things left behind by Mao Yang. It should be because of this that no one has discovered the secret of this place all these years. This was indeed the most logical explanation. Mao Yang was the clan leader. Naturally, he could do whatever he wanted. He could only let in whoever he wanted. If he did not want to be discovered, who could unravel these secrets? Who would dare to touch the power he had left behind? However, Rongxiu was different. He had mercilessly attacked the moment he arrived. Coupled with Zichen, this secret was naturally exposed. Mao Yang would never have imagined that he had locked them up here to threaten them. In the end, they had unearthed such an old secret. If this matter was exposed, Mao Yang would no longer be the clan leader. Compared to their ancestors, the clan leader was nothing. The entire Great Void Phoenix Dragon clan would probably go on a crusade against him. At this moment, Zichen suddenly stepped forward. Step back. Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu looked at each other and took a step back. Whoosh. Zichen suddenly spread his wings. Then, Chu Luiyue saw a faint glow on his wings. That was the skeleton and power of the Great Void Phoenix Dragon. Then, the blood bead slowly drifted toward Zichen. Finally, it split into 2 and melted into his wings. Rumble. The ground beneath their feet suddenly shook violently. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1750. However, the tremor only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, the sound of something shattering came from the surroundings. Chu Luiyue quickly looked up and saw that the space around them was collapsing rapidly. The illusion was about to break. Rong Xiu immediately rushed over and grabbed her waist. Boom! The void shattered completely. The few of them disappeared from where they stood. At the same time, the flickering teleportation formation in the cave also disappeared quietly. Outside Divine Dragon Island, Nan Su Huai suddenly sensed something. His eyes were filled with shock. Then, half of the teleportation formation dimmed. When Sheng Wanjing and Chu Ning saw the scene, they were both shocked. What's going on? What happened? Sheng Wanjing asked anxiously. Nan Su Huai did not answer his question immediately. Instead, he gritted his teeth and channeled his force into the teleportation formation. However, the dimmed half did not light up again. His back was drenched in cold sweat. Sheng Wanjing and Chu Ning felt uneasy when they saw his expression. Chu Ning asked again. Dean, what's going on? Why did half of the teleportation formation dim out of the blue? Nan Su Huai closed his eyes and said in a deep voice. Half of the teleportation formation is destroyed. Half of it? This is. Chu Ning frowned. His eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. He had never heard of such a thing. However, Sheng Wanjing seemed to have thought of something. His face darkened and was filled with deep worry. Nan Su Huai explained. A normal teleportation formation will collapse completely once it's affected by an external force. However, our teleportation formation is different. Half of it means, the other end of the teleportation formation has been destroyed. Chu Ning reacted. Then, doesn't that mean they won't be able to come back? Nan Su Huai shook his head. Not necessarily. This teleportation formation is different from other teleportation formations. Half of it is destroyed, but the other half is still fine. If they can find a way to repair the other end of the teleportation formation, they can still return safely. His words did not ease Chu Ning's mind. It was easy to say, but how could it be so easy to do? Nan Su Huai had said before that other than the dean, no one else was qualified to learn how to repair the teleportation formation. Then how would you, and the others recover and return? Nan Su Huai knew what Chu Ning was worried about and consoled him. Chu Ning, you has learned about teleportation arrays before. Although she couldn't use it with her current strength, she still had Rong Xiu by her side. If the two of them worked together, there might be hope. Hearing this, Chu Ning finally calmed down. Really? Nan Su Huai smiled helplessly. You, is my only disciple. Her talent is exceptional, and I have always regarded her as my successor, teaching her everything I know. Although I haven't formally taught her about the teleportation formation, I've already let her learn some of the relevant content. If she could master it and rebuild the other half of the teleportation formation, she would be able to leave the Divine Dragon Island. Chu Ning let out a long sigh after hearing Nan Su Huai's words. Although this matter was still full of uncertainty, it was still better than having no way out. With Yu Er's intelligence and Rong Xiu's help, perhaps they could really succeed. Sheng Wanjing was thinking about something else. This teleportation formation has been fine all this time. Why is half of it suddenly destroyed? Both Nan Su Huai and Chu Ning fell silent for a moment. Needless to say, something must have happened inside. Could it be that Dumpling has been discovered? Or, has she encountered some other trouble? Sheng Wanjing frowned. If that was the case, they would be in big trouble. Nan Su Huai suddenly turned around and looked in the direction of the Divine Dragon Island. After a moment, he said in a deep voice. I don't think there's much movement over at the Divine Dragon Island for the time being. Let's wait and see. If something really happened, the great phoenix dragon would definitely send people out to stop them. No matter what, it was better to observe the situation first before making a decision. After serious consideration, Sheng Guanjing and Chu Ning nodded in agreement. Chu Ning sighed softly. Now, we can only hope that they are safe and successful. The commotion in the Seven Lotus Mountain had also attracted the attention of the guards outside. The two guards turned around at the same time. Their faces were filled with unconcealable surprise and excitement. They're finally coming out? Only the heavens knew that they had been guarding here day and night until the flowers had withered. It was really boring. However, these two people had special identities. The patriarch had personally ordered them to guard them strictly. They did not dare to relax at all. Their minds were constantly in a tense state, and they were very tired. If those two people could come out now, they would be liberated. However, after waiting for a long time, no one came out of the cave entrance of the Seven Lotus Mountain. Moreover, the trace of fluctuation that had attracted their attention had completely dissipated. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. The two guards looked at each other. What's going on? Could it be that they were hallucinating? That was not possible. Should we go in and take a look? One of the guards asked. The other glanced at him. The patriarch only told us to guard the Seven Lotus Mountain. He didn't say that we can go in. This place was almost considered a forbidden area for the entire Great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Even if they were allowed to enter, not many Great Phoenix Dragons would want to go in. That's true. What should we do? I think they can't hold on any longer. That's why they're causing such a commotion. I think they'll have to bow their heads and admit defeat in a day or two. So you mean, we should continue to wait? Let's wait. The defense of the Seven Lotus Mountain is extremely strong. They can't escape. What's there to worry about? That's true. They were very confident in the defense of the Seven Lotus Mountain. They did not believe that the humans could fight against them. Moreover, this was their territory. At this moment, they did not know that Rong Xiao and Chu Luyue, who they thought were being tortured, had already left the Seven Lotus Mountain. Chu Luyue and the others were swept into the void. After a long period of darkness, they finally stepped on solid ground again. A faint glow surged in from all directions. After staying in the dark cave for so long, Chu Luyue was still not used to it. She narrowed her eyes and looked around. With one look, she was stunned on the spot. At this moment, they were in a spacious and quaint hall. Black jade stones were neatly laid on the ground. In the middle of the hall, there was a white jade pillar that was as thick as 10 people hugging it. There were cloud patterns carved on it, and a lifelike great phoenix dragon. It was a coiling dragon pillar. A powerful aura emanated from the carved great phoenix dragon. It was frightening. At this moment, it was looking down at them majestically. In an instant, Chu Luyue understood something. This is the Great Void Temple. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1751. Other than them, there was no one else in the main hall. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. Chu Luyue held her breath. She really did not expect that they would actually come to this place. Just like the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, the Great Void Temple was their most sacred and solemn place, and they could not easily step into it. Even the people of the Great Phoenix Dragon clan had to go through many tests if they wanted to enter, let alone them. At this moment, Chu Luyue suddenly had a very strange feeling in her heart. Recently, she seemed to be quite fated with the two ancient divine beasts. In this short period of time, she first went to the divine Phoenix Mountain and even talked to their ancestor in the Phoenix Temple. And now, she was at the divine Dragon Island. She was originally imprisoned, but who knew that in the blink of an eye, she would be at the Great Void Temple? Chu Luyue looked back and was silent for a moment. Not only did she come with Rong Xiao, but she also brought Dumpling and Zichen. These two, one was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, and the other used the skeleton of the great phoenix dragon to reconstruct her physical body. What a sin. Chu Luiyue held her forehead and felt a headache coming on. Looking at the tightly shut door, she began to seriously think about how to leave more conveniently. Outside the door is Mao Yang and the rest. Rong Xiu chuckled. Chu Luiyue instantly deflated. Obviously, it was impossible to leave through the door. Windows would not work either. It was obvious that the outside of the Great Void Temple must be full of guards. Unless they went back the way they came, they would really be trapped here. You, look, there's something in the pillar. Dumpling suddenly pulled Chu Luiyue's sleeve and said. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked. There were indeed 4 purple light spots in the coiling dragon pillar. That should be the great phoenix dragon that entered here to find the inheritance. Rong Xiu explained. He was quite familiar with the Thousand Summit, so he could make a rough guess. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. So you're saying, there's actually another world within this coiling dragon pillar? Do you see the scales on it? Zichen suddenly said. Each scale contains a succession. Those that are still flickering are the ones that haven't been taken away yet. Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. Previously, she had heard from Rong Xiu and Zichen that the inheritance of the great phoenix dragon tribe was passed down from generation to generation. The person who obtained the inheritance would return it to the Great Void Temple after death. The Great Void Phoenix dragons had entered the coiling dragon pillar to search for the inheritance. At this moment, the eyes of the dragon carved on the white jade pillar suddenly flashed with a ray of light. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately became alert. However, she quickly realized that the pair of eyes weren't looking at her. They were looking at Zichen. Yes. Zichen's body had fused with that person's remnant blood. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, she suddenly felt a strong force wrap around her. Their figures instantly disappeared from where they were. A moment later, a few more spots of light appeared on the coiling dragon pillar. They floated lightly and shone brightly. Outside the Great Void Temple, everyone was still waiting. Ever since the previous youth obtained a decent inheritance, everyone felt more at ease. Waiting didn't seem so unbearable anymore. Mao Yang sat on a chair. The Great Void Temple in front of him was still calm. He thought for a moment, then asked an elder beside him. How's the situation at 7 Lotus Peak? Thinking about it, quite a long time had passed. Logically speaking, the two of them should have figured it out by now. However, there was still no news until now. That elder hurriedly said, Elder, everything is as usual. In fact, the person in charge of guarding would report once a day. Under such circumstances, Mao Yang still took the initiative to ask. It was clear how important this matter was to him. Of course, this was the first time humans had barged into Divine Dragon Island. Not only Mao Yang, but the entire tribe was paying close attention to this matter. Everyone was waiting for an outcome. Of course, in their hearts, there was only one outcome: Rong Xiu and Sheng Guanyu had conceded defeat. None of them had thought of any other possibilities, including Mao Yang. Hearing this reply, his brows quickly furrowed. Something's not right. They could endure a day or two in 7 Lotus Peak, but after such a long time, they still refused to yield. What a stubborn bunch. Mao Yang's gaze turned cold. Then we'll continue to wait. They would wait until they figured it out themselves. Yes. On the other side, Chu Luiyue and the others entered the coiling dragon pillar. Chu Luiyue felt that the scene in front of him kept changing. It was almost impossible to see clearly. Finally, their bodies felt heavy and their feet touched the ground. In front of them was a lush forest. The sound of flowing water could be heard not far away. Chu Luiyue looked over. There seemed to be a lake in the depths of the forest. A faint white mist shrouded the lake, bringing with it a sense of tranquility and serenity. However, alarm bells rang in Chu Luiyue's heart. Almost instinctively, her entire body tensed up and she was on full alert. Rong Xiu held her hand, stepped forward, and shielded her behind him. Dumpling also grabbed her sleeve tightly. Her grape-like eyes widened as she looked straight ahead. Only Zi Chen's eyes flashed with a trace of suspicion. Someone finally found this place, a hoarse and rough voice came from the lake. It was an extremely calm tone, but Chu Luiyue felt that every word was like a clap of thunder. It shocked her to her core. It's really a human? Digression, rolling on the ground begging for tickets la 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 la. Comments Xiaoxiang coins have been distributed December peripheral list, Xiaoxiang star comments, lazy sister Xiaowaluo Yuxian IOQQ star of recommendation votes, Yinyatongla comments star, listen to the wind and tell me cheeky smile New Year's 3 days event list. Mo lure memories of Kiani and Yutongla Charlesil Yu Mem is the cutest Ching Qian's cat ambergris the world's prosperity. The QQ list is posted in the comments section of the bookstore. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1752. Then, Chu Luiyue felt as if a pair of eyes were sweeping across her body. That gaze was clear and sharp, and she had the illusion that she had been seen through. 2 humans and a crimson gold heavenly phoenix. There was a hint of shock in that voice. Obviously, it was too strange for Chu Luiyue and the others to appear here. After a moment, that voice laughed again. I was wondering which talented junior had found this place, but it turns out, it's a 3-eyed divine eagle that has fused with the skeleton of a great phoenix dragon. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. The other party had recognized all of their identities so easily. She was about to speak when Rong Xiu spoke first. We unintentionally barged into this place and disturbed you, senior. Please forgive us. After a short period of silence, the white mist above the lake suddenly gathered. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into the appearance of a middle-aged man. Come forward. His voice was filled with inviolable majesty. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other. Zi Chen had already walked forward. Rong Xiu nodded slightly. The two of them followed closely behind. Dumpling grabbed the corner of Chu Luiyue's clothes and followed behind. There was no sun here, but the sky was blue and very bright. The forest was lush and verdant, and there were piles of fallen leaves. When one stepped on them, they would make creaking sounds. A gentle breeze blew over, bringing with it a faint fragrance of plants and trees. Everything looked no different from an ordinary forest. They quickly passed through the forest and arrived at the lake. This was not a very big lake, but the water was still and deep, and there was a faint phosphorescence on the surface of the lake. If one did not look at the illusory figure hanging above the lake, this was really quiet and leisurely. It was a good place to rest. It was a pity that Chu Luiyue could not relax at this point. She knew very well that the person in front of her was a member of the great Phoenix Dragon clan. The closer they got, the clearer they could see. This man looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was dressed in a long robe, had an ordinary face, and a long beard. At first glance, it seemed very ordinary, nothing special. However, the piercingly cold aura around him clearly indicated that this man was definitely not a simple person. Chu Luiyue even felt that this person was not inferior to Mao Yang. Of course you didn't enter this place by accident. The man smiled. The Divine Dragon Island has never allowed humans to enter. It is definitely not a coincidence that you are here. Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. When the Great Phoenix Dragon and the others saw her and Rong Xiu barge into Divine Dragon Island, they were filled with righteous indignation. However, the man in front of her, who was clearly also a Great Phoenix Dragon, did not seem to care about this matter. After all, other than the two of them, there was also Dumpling. How could he tolerate this? There's no need to doubt it. I don't have any intention of welcoming you all. It's just that, this legendary 3-eyed eagle and I are fated to meet. For its sake, I won't pursue the matter. Several pairs of eyes looked at Zichen. The man sighed and smiled helplessly. At first, I thought it was a smart junior who had come. Who knew? However, that doesn't matter. The bloodline power of the great Phoenix Dragon clan flows in your body. You can be considered half a member of our clan. Chu Liuyue's eyelids twitched. This is really casual. As an ancient divine beast, the great Phoenix Dragon valued its bloodline the most. In their eyes, Zichen was just an anomaly, an existence that tarnished their bloodline. However, why did the person in front of her not seem to think so? Of course, this matter shouldn't be settled like this, but, since you have fused with my blood, I will naturally treat you as one of my own. This sentence was instantly like a handful of water poured into a pot of oil, instantly causing sparks to splatter everywhere. Chu Luyue raised her eyes in shock and looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. Stormy waves had already set off in her heart. He said. Zichen had fused with his blood? Then his identity was on the verge of being revealed. You are the one who was locked in the Seven Lotus Mountain? Hearing the words, Seven Lotus Mountain, a trace of haze flashed across the man's face. That's right. Rong Xiu's eyes flashed slightly, and he immediately cupped his hands and bowed. So it's Senior Mao Zhen. Sorry for the disrespect. Mao Zhen looked at him in surprise. You know my name? Rong Xiu's lips curled into a smile. Senior Mao Zhen is a genius of the great Phoenix Dragon clan that appears once in 10,000 years. Of course, I have heard of your name. Chu Luyue silently gave His Highness the successor a thumbs up in her heart. This sentence was really good at praising. As expected, Mao Zhen's expression improved a lot, but soon, her eyes dimmed again, and she laughed self-deprecatingly. The glory of the past has long dissipated. Now, I am just a ghost. I have been hiding here for 1,000 years without seeing the light of day. What's the difference between that and death? Chu Luyue held her breath. Mao Zhen. He was actually still alive. Rumor had it that the legendary figure who had killed 7 people in one night due to chi deviation and was finally executed by the Great Phoenix Dragon was actually hiding in the coiling dragon pillar of the Great Void Temple. Mao Yang and the others would never have thought that he would be hiding here. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and smiled. You are still alive, and the inheritance of the Great Phoenix Dragon ancestor is still with you. Your identity is naturally different. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luyue felt a biting cold murderous intent suddenly attacking. Her heart trembled. However, Rong Xiu was calm and composed, so she did not move. Just as the sharp aura was about to cut their bodies, it finally stopped. Mao Zhen looked coldly at Rong Xiu. Junior, how dare you? How dare he say such words in front of him? There were no more than 3 people in the world who knew about the inheritance that he had. This kid was so bold. Rong Xiu's expression did not change, and he said indifferently, since we came here with Zichen, it's not difficult to guess this. What's the point of pretending in front of you? That would only make Mao Zhen feel that they were hypocritical and unreliable. Therefore, he might as well be frank with them. Mao Zhen stared at Rong Xiu for a long time, and the coldness on her face gradually faded. You have guts. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1753. That's right, I did leave a clue in the cave of the 7 Lotus Peak, hoping that someone of the younger generation would find this place. But after such a long time, there hasn't been any progress. I didn't have much hope at first, but I didn't expect. Mao Zhen looked at Zichen with a heavy gaze. He really did not expect that a 3-eyed godly eagle would appear. Chu Luyue pondered for a moment. Senior Mao Zhen, ever since you left the 7 Lotus Peak, almost no one from the Great Phoenix Dragon tribe has gone there. It was a coincidence that we were imprisoned there. After that, she briefly recounted what had happened. Of course, she only said that they came from the Godslayer Mound. She didn't mention what had happened in the Godslayer Mound. Mao Zhen sneered when he heard this. Mao Yang hates me to the core. Of course, he wouldn't allow anyone else to go to the Seven Lotus Peak. That's why he waited here for more than 1,000 years. What happened to you back then? Did it have something to do with clan leader Mao Yang? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but ask. Mao Zhen snorted. Since you've already found this place, you must have guessed it. There's no need for me to hide it from you. He took a deep breath as if to suppress the surging emotions in his heart. That's right. Back then, I was framed by him and ended up like this. He was the one who killed the 7 people and framed me for it. He was also the one who trapped me at the 7 Lotus Peak and tried to steal the power of my bloodline. Unfortunately, he was one step behind and I managed to escape. Even though he had paid a terrible price for it. But in the end, he still survived. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other. Although they had already guessed it, it was still shocking to hear the person involved admit it. This was definitely the greatest secret of the great Phoenix Dragon tribe. Then, he didn't know that you were still alive? This was something that Chu Luiyue was very curious about. Since Mao Yang was willing to put in so much effort to deal with Mao Zhen, he must have wanted to kill all of them. All these years, could it be that he really didn't have any doubts at all? Mao Zhen suddenly laughed out loud as if she had heard a joke. His voice was low and coarse, and his laughter was like thunder that struck heavily on one's eardrums, causing one's mind to tremble. Ha ha ha. Aren't you overestimating that Mao Yang and underestimating me, Mao Zhen? Back then, if I hadn't been at the critical juncture of my breakthrough, how could that despicable person have been my match? His words did not conceal his pride and boldness. That confidence was based on absolute strength. Compared to Mao Yang, who was like a smiling tiger, Chu Luiyue admired the person in front of him more. Laughing and cursing, unbridled and flamboyant, magnanimous. Even after being harmed to such an extent, she still had such an imposing manner. It was hard to imagine what kind of giant Mao Zhen would be if those things didn't happen in the past. What a pity. Seeing her expression, Mao Yang raised his eyebrows and continued. After the ancestor died, his body transformed into this world. The inheritances of the clan were all hidden here. Every 1,000 Peak summit, the younger generation would enter this place to find their own inheritances. This is the most sacred place in the entire Great Phoenix Dragon clan. Even if Mao Yang became the clan leader, he couldn't spy on this place at all. Because of this, I've been here for 1,000 years, but Mao Yang still didn't notice. Rong Xiu suddenly asked. Senior Mao Zhen, the Great Phoenix Dragon clan only has one chance to enter this place in their lifetime, right? You, Mao Zhen laughed. I have the ancestors' inheritance, so I can naturally enter and leave this place at will. Mao Yang thought that I had died and my soul was destroyed, so he couldn't find the ancestors' inheritance. Who would have thought that I was here? So that was it. What kind of expression would Mao Yang have when he found out about this? I'm afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep up the peaceful and hypocritical smile on his face, right? Zichen suddenly said. Then why did you lead me here? Mao Zhen's expression gradually changed. He stared at Zichen. Naturally, to find a suitable descendant for the ancestors' inheritance. The forest was silent. The air seemed to have frozen. After a while, Chu Luiyue came back to his senses and realized the true meaning of Mao Zhen's words. He wanted Zichen to obtain the inheritance of the great Phoenix Dragon ancestor. Was this a joke? He was a three-eyed eagle. Zichen seemed to have expected him to say this. After a short silence, he said calmly. Senior Mao Zhen, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. I'm the Eagle Lord of the Three-Eyed Eagle clan. There's no reason for me to inherit the inheritance of the great Phoenix Dragon clan. If someone else was here and heard Zichen's words, they would probably scold him for being stupid. The inheritance of the ancient divine beast ancestor. How precious it was. Many demonic beasts in the world yearned for it. Now that it was in front of him, he rejected it. But Zichen really didn't want it. Although he had used the great phoenix dragon's wing bone to reconstruct his body and fused with its bloodline power, he had always remembered his identity. He didn't belong to the great phoenix dragon clan. Not in the past, not in the present, and not in the future. Mao Zhen didn't seem to expect Zichen to answer like this. He frowned subconsciously. Are you sure? Only one person in the world could get such an opportunity. Mao Yang hated him. In order to snatch the inheritance of the ancestor, he did everything he could, but he still got nothing. But this three-eyed eagle said it didn't want it? Zichen nodded. I can return your power. Originally, it had only swallowed the blood bead because it felt that something was calling it, not because it wanted to obtain anything. Mao Zhen's face was a little cold. When he saw that it was the legendary three-eyed eagle that had arrived, his heart was filled with disappointment. But he quickly chose to accept this fact and was prepared to give the inheritance to it. But now, it didn't want it. It really didn't know what was good for it. Zichen's answer was so unexpected that Mao Zhen took a while to digest it completely. He snorted and shouted in a deep voice, I don't have a body now. I don't have a physical body now. What's the use of this inheritance? Waves gradually rose on the surface of the lake, and the surrounding leaves rustled. The world seemed to be restless because of Mao Zhen's anger. However, Zichen was unmoved. His eyes were indifferent. There's one thing that you might not know. Not only am I the Eagle Lord of the Three-Eyed Eagle clan, but I'm also her contracted divine beast. Senior Mao Zhen, do you really not mind? Mao Zhen was shocked and looked at Chu Luyue. And me. And me. I'm also Yu's contracted divine beast. Dumpling waved its hand proudly and tried to make its presence known. Mao Zhen's eyes widened. What did you say? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1754. At this moment, Mao Zhen was in a mess. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Although the Three-Eyed Eagle clan's bloodline was not comparable to the two ancient divine beasts, it was still considered quite noble. The Eagle Master in front of him was actually willing to form a contract with a human? And the little girl next to it. That was a real crimson gold heavenly phoenix. She was actually willing to give up this face? This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that not only did these two divine beasts form contracts with humans, but they also formed contracts with the same person. Didn't he just stay here for a little longer? Why did the outside world become like this? Besides, 1,000 years was nothing compared to the tens of thousands of years that the crimson gold heavenly phoenix and the three-eyed eagle had existed, right? How could? Mao Zhen was in a daze. He looked at Dumpling and Zichen for a while, and his fingers were trembling slightly. You. Dumpling's eyes were bright as she flaunted in a crisp voice. I've been with you for longer than Zichen. Zichen looked back and glanced at her. Dumpling made a face, and her chubby little face was full of pride. Zichen's eyes moved slightly, and he calmly retracted his gaze. Mao Zhen pointed at Dumpling and almost couldn't catch his breath. This. What's there to flaunt about? You're the incomparably noble ancient divine beast, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Do your clansmen know that you're so happy here? Even if the relationship between the great phoenix dragon clan and the crimson gold sky phoenix clan was very subtle, and they habitually disliked each other, Mao Zhen couldn't help but feel heartache for the entire crimson gold sky phoenix clan at this moment. How could there be such a weirdo? Not only did she form a contract with a human, but she also served the same master as the three-eyed eagle. Most importantly, she was so happy. Mao Zhen didn't understand. He really didn't understand. When he saw Dumpling previously, he had doubts in his heart. Firstly, he felt that it was quite strange for her to be able to take human form at such a young age. Secondly, she had been tightly tugging on the corner of that human woman's clothes, looking very intimate. It was just that he had been thinking about how to deal with the ancestral inheritance, so he didn't have time to think about it. Who knew this would happen? Chu Luiyue gently rubbed Dumpling's head and smiled at Mao Zhen. Senior Mao Zhen, I'm sorry, but Dumpling is still young and innocent. Don't take her words to heart. Mao Zhen's mouth twitched. Children's words carry no harm. He had lived for so many years and still never knew that this term could actually be used on the crimson gold celestial phoenix. Mao Zhen took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and held her forehead in pain. Even though he didn't have a physical body, he still felt a headache coming on. What kind of people were they waiting for? Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the forest in the distance. It seemed like someone was heading this way. Mao Zhen's expression turned serious as she glanced in that direction. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu exchanged glances. The person who came should be one of the 4 people who participated in the Thousand Peak Summit and were still here. However, after a while, the footsteps gradually faded away. It seemed that person had left. Soon, the footsteps completely disappeared. It seemed that the person had already left. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked at Mao Zhen. If that person had come here just now, perhaps he could have obtained their ancestors' inheritance from Mao Zhen. After all, compared to an outsider like Ziqin, their own juniors were much more suitable candidates. However, Mao Zhen's expression was calm, as if he was already used to it. Actually, over the years, the Thousand Peak Summit has been held many times, and many good juniors have come every time. A few of them, like the one just now, have found their way here. Mao Zhen suddenly spoke in a much calmer tone. However, none of them have walked through the forest and really come here. Chu Luiyue saw a trace of desolation on his face. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, it was understandable. After all, Mao Zhen was a great phoenix dragon. If possible, he would have wanted to leave this inheritance to an outstanding descendant. As he said, he no longer had a physical body, so there was no point in leaving this inheritance with him. If not for the fact that he really had no other choice, why would he choose Ziqin? After experiencing too many disappointments, his hot-bloodedness would eventually cool down. In the battle back then, my physical body was damaged and my strength was exhausted. Although I managed to preserve my life here, I'm attached to this lake and can't leave. In addition, things like opportunities are the most unpredictable and can't be forced. Those children have no fate with me or my ancestors' inheritance. Mao Zhen had already thought about this. Although it was inevitable that he felt regretful, life was not as good as he thought. Even he was the same. He looked at Ziqin, and there seemed to be waves in his eyes. These descendants of the clan came here one after another, but they didn't notice my presence. You're not one of us, and you have nothing to do with the great Phoenix Dragon clan, but you still came here. Perhaps this was really the will of the heavens. Mao Zhen suddenly paused halfway through. In fact, there was no point in saying these words. Ziqin was unwilling to accept this inheritance, and he had already formed a contract with Chu Luiyue. These 2 points were enough to make Mao Zhen give up his initial idea. A forcibly picked melon was not sweet. His only regret was that after today, he still didn't know how long he would have to wait to find a suitable successor. Rong Xiu suddenly said. Senior Mao Zhen, are you really willing to be trapped here forever? Mao Zhen was stunned. Of course he was not willing. He had not avenged Mao Yang. He had not taken back what he had lost. But now he had almost nothing, and it was not easy to find a successor, but it was not suitable. What else could he do? He looked at Rong Xiu in shock. What do you mean? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. Nothing. To be honest, clan leader Mao Yang was very rude to you and me before and made things difficult for us. At the Thousand Summit, he said that if you and I did not erase our memories of coming here, we would be imprisoned on Divine Dragon Island forever. You are the successor of the great Phoenix Dragon ancestor. Whether it is talent or other things, you are better than Mao Yang. As long as the truth is clarified, the position of clan leader will definitely change. At that time, you will be able to take back what belongs to you, and we will be able to leave Divine Dragon Island openly. Why not kill two birds with one stone? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes. You want to form an alliance with me? Rong Xiu smiled frankly. If we can be on good terms with you, it will be our honor. Mao Zhen closed his eyes. Countless scenes of the past surged out from the depths of his mind. After a long time, he said in a deep voice. I don't have a physical body. If I leave here, my soul will be destroyed. Rong Xiu asked. What if we can help you reconstruct your physical body? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.